Supervisors to order here September 15th, 2015. We'll begin with the salute to the flag, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Pullen?
Mr. Galloway?
Here.
Mr. Brasky?
Here.
Mr. Harvey?
Here.
Mr. Dents? Mr. Rocco?
Here.
The record show Mr. Dents had a family commitment this evening. He's unable to be here. Before we begin, I just want to ask everyone for a moment of silence. This is the obviously meeting that is occurring just after the anniversary of the terrorist attacks of 9/11. And so in memory of the approximately 3,000 innocent victims of that terrorist attack, and for the several thousand Americans, military and civilian, who have lost their lives due to terrorism, I'll ask for a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to begin. Oh, actually, I think before we start, just for people, in case anyone's here to discuss item number 5, due to an error by a member of the township staff, we're going to have to table that item tonight because it is a rezoning property that is going to be rezoned. Has to be not only advertised, it also has to be posted. And while we did do the advertising, a member of our staff did not do the posting as is legally required. And so I'll ask for a motion to table item number 5 to a date certain, which will be October 6th.
Correct.
Which will be our first meeting in October.
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we sent our apologies earlier to the developer and his professionals, and I apologize to residents who may have come out tonight to discuss that issue. So obviously a mistake on our part, and we'll try to keep that from happening again. Okay. Township did have an executive session earlier today, or just really to hear some information. Mr. Clark.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, before the meeting this evening, the board held an informational session with the chairman and the executive director of the Township of Falls Authority. No deliberations took place during this session. The board was merely getting information from those two individuals just on some upcoming matters with TOFA and just on their current status. Okay,
thank you. All right, we're going to begin with our public comment sign-in sheet. Okay, we have 3 residents signed in to speak. And the first name on our list is Anthony D'Amico.
Good evening. It's Anthony D'Amico, 555 Stevens Road, Falls Township. I just want to first of all say that I am opposed. I am opposed and against what's being represented on this piece of paper this evening for the reasons I've always stated: traffic, the congestion, the noise, tractor trailers. Anything that goes there is going to be a big problem. I've said it a million times. When the Acme was there, it was never a problem. Everything was in the back. The residents, including myself, was not subjected to any of that noise or traffic. Even when it first opened up 18 years ago, when we thought it was going to be a problem, it wasn't. So rather than keep on going on, what I have to say, which I've said many times, I'm being represented by Stephen Goldstein. I've asked him, I retained him as an attorney for me, for that area, for me, for my neighbors, and I'd like to put that on record.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you. All right. John, is it Estock?
Estock.
Okay. That's fine. To make sure you use the microphone. Sorry.
120 Winding Way. What did we find out? Every time I see somebody, I seen you, and
Yep.
I seen Jeff, and the story was nothing. We can't find nothing.
Yeah, I apologize. We don't have our zoning officer here tonight. He's our code enforcement. He's the one who would take a
We
look. I
can't
know
find nothing either.
you know, it's, and I've talked with a couple residents about this. It's when properties are abandoned or foreclosed on, oftentimes mortgages are sold from bank to bank to bank to bank, and we're not notified. And so I certainly can ask you, and I haven't received any update from anybody, but, you know, I haven't heard anything
I get
since.
kind of tired. In 120, I got people pulled up like, excuse me, sir, you want to, you know, anybody wants about that house? I'll sell it to you for $1 because the township don't own it, I don't own it. Give me the buck, you got the house.
Somebody has it. I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know if there's a fast way for us to find out or not. But I mean, I know our staff has looked because obviously it's a headache for us.
Well, I got
But,
your headache
no,
out of the
obviously for
way
you
today.
more.
I got your headache out of the way. I hope you had a nice day because I had a hell of a day. I went to Doylestown, you know, up there, county seat,
Yeah.
and I went to the deed department because that's where you start out. You want to find about a house.
Right.
And I got everything right here for you. So all you got to do is just call the bank and tell them what's going on. You want the grass cut, you want the trees removed, you want the place cleaned up, because the neighbor next door, he's a little guy, 5'6", 84 years old, and he gets mad. Very mad.
If you, I mean, you know, if you want to, we can get a copy of that. Certainly, I'm sure. It probably is something we already have.
I'm going to give it to you. I'm not
Okay.
going to need it.
Mr. Gray will take it. He'll give it to the zoning officer. He may already have that information. And
I'll take care of it.
okay, all right.
All yours.
Mr. Harvey, we were able to get all this information. We were able to find out that the property had been foreclosed by the bank. And there have been, I believe, citations issued by our code enforcement department to clean up the property. We would have to check with Mr. Bennett. Maybe we could report back at the first meeting in October. But it has, some citations have been issued.
Yeah. Has it gotten? Has it?
Nothing's been done. The guy has 2 mortgages against the house. We found that out today.
Okay.
It's easy. I don't need this stuff.
Code enforcement keeps coming
They
out,
stop by and they don't know nothing,
we
okay?
can't find out anything about it, okay? My husband went out and bought a saw,
Just-
because we have to have our phone line changed from the pole to the house, because of the branches and shaped our wire thing. And it's not fair for us to have to go through this crap, okay?
I agree.
So Eddie Newbauer keeps coming out once or twice a week. I'm sorry we can't find out who owns the property. That's why we went to Doylestown today, okay? And I hope that you can find something out for us soon. My husband's been cutting the grass over there. Township came out twice this year. He's been cutting the grass.
You know what, kids, you
Okay.
No problem.
So-
Don't drive, honey.
Okay.
At least, you got a bank.
Get something
over there now.
done
You got a
about
bank,
the
you got a
property.
thing. Don't just-
We can look,
There's-
but we can.
There's dead mice laying in the living room, okay?
How many times
So-
have you we go one
Yes.
way? Get it done, buddy. Get it done.
And we're, you know,
See you later.
we're gonna do what we can do. But even with the citations,
All the time.
there's we can't.
All the time.
There's nobody to put in jail. We can't. It's not like we can arrest anybody. There's nothing.
Month here in September, we're 60 years in our house.
Okay.
$9,250, not like it.
Mr. Harvey, unfortunately, the sad fact is that banks are notoriously non-responsive to code enforcement matters when they are forced to take over a property. I believe this property may have gone back to the bank in default because the property owner may no longer be living. The bank, again, they are just notoriously non-responsive. This is an issue that we deal with in a lot of municipalities. Once the bank takes it over, they don't want to be putting a lot of time and effort into it, and citing them doesn't get the grass cut, doesn't get those things. It just adds a couple of fines onto the property. But unfortunately, it's just a problem that we deal with in a lot of places.
Yeah, and if anything, you know, and I appreciate Mr. Estock's and Mrs. Estock's, you know, anger over the issue. But I get, actually, them cutting the grass actually takes away something from us, because we could be cutting it and then leaning the property. And the more, every time our guys have to go out there, we can lean the property, and that just adds to the headache for the bank. And that's, of course, when you get the bank to actually do something, if it gets to be too much of a headache for them. And so, I want to try and catch him, to ask him to stop cutting the grass so our guys can do it. But we certainly can take a look at safety issues. That's obviously the big thing. And so I see Mr. Gray's writing down some notes he's going to give to Mr. Bennett tomorrow. Madeline Jones.
Good evening, Madeline Jones, Falls Township. Just briefly on not having the grass cut breeds insects, mosquitoes, and everything else.
Sure.
So perhaps that's one reason they could be doing that. Dan Fraser.
Dale Frazier.
Dale
Yes, from
Fraser.
Goal.
If
Yes.
I may, just call for a moment of prayerful silence and remembrance of him.
If you just want to explain to everybody who may not know who he is, if you don't mind.
I don't.
I can do it.
Okay, please, because
Okay.
I don't know how long he's been involved in Goal,
Okay.
the community program, but
And Mr. Frazier came to this board a couple times. Trying to think of how long ago it was. I forget. To me, 7 years ago or something, 8 years ago. Started a program called Greenbelt Overhaul Alliance of Levittown. It was a volunteer organization that went around and did cleanup work in the various greenbelt areas all over Levittown, every Tullytown, Bristol Township, Middletown, and Falls, and really did a tremendous amount. We donated quite a lot of money to him when he first started out, for him to buy equipment and trailers, and we worked with him on many issues. And sadly, he was stricken earlier this year with cancer and then passed away just maybe a month or so ago. And so, at a relatively young age. So it's very sad for obviously him and his family, and for the community, because he really was committed to improving, cleaning up pollution and litter and everything else, and making those green belts really something to be proud of. So thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, and absolutely, a moment of silence is appropriate.
the agenda for this evening's board meeting,
Yes.
has that appeared on government channel or online?
Both, I think.
Because I looked this morning, and it was not on government channel to my knowledge, because I sat a few that were, quite a while.
Yeah, I don't look for it on the government channel, but, Mr. Gray said it's been there. It's been our habit to post it. It's pretty routine, so.
Okay, because I'll go home this evening and, turn it on, because it was not there this morning.
Okay.
Another question, I'm not perhaps expecting an answer. Why did it take 8 to 10 months to fill in a pothole at New Falls and Penn Valley Road in front of the Sunoco, at literally about 3 feet from the ramp? A pothole on the crosswalk where you have senior citizens crossing as well as students. 8 to 10 months before it got filled in. I called Joe Arneo's office way back, and I followed up, I'm sure, and he said he got my message and was aware of it. And it was just recently done before school opened. Now, there was no painting. Apparently, it doesn't need painting this year, the stripes on the crosswalk itself. But it seems any repairs only become about in late August, September, when school's about to open. 8 to 10 months for that pothole to be filled.
Well, depending on what road it was, it's a state road. So it would be PennDOT that would be responsible for filling potholes. And they usually do it sort of all at once. They just kind of go around, and they always wait till after there's no more threat of
I understand that,
ice and
but
snow
when
and those
you
kinds of
have,
things.
but this is end of September practically. And Joe Arneo was aware of it, and he said, yes, he got his message. So it was in his hands at that point, because I know they're out there. Anyway, the message, if I correctly heard, regarding Wawa from the last meeting, it is dead. There is going to be no resurrection of the Wawa
There's
plans?
the plan we are looking at tonight is not a Wawa.
No, I understand that, but
So-
no plans coming up at all in front of the board or planning commission?
There's
planning
nothing,
board?
correct, there's nothing scheduled to come before us or any of our boards regarding any development that has a Wawa. That's correct.
Okay. And I made a notation, a comment, last time I was here about 2 meetings ago regarding what the township and what is the police department doing or plan to do, or what is their proposals, if any, to curb the speeding, running stop signs, running traffic lights, yield signs, everything. And Mr. Dents is not here, but if I remember correctly, at the board comment that evening, he made a statement regarding go online and for statistics. I wasn't looking for statistics. I'm looking to stop the statistics.
Well, I think Mr. Dents was referencing the board which he helped create, which was the Neighborhood Traffic Advisory Council, which actually met last night. And that board is the one that fields complaints. And you, obviously, people that have access to internet can send them in that way, or you can send them into the township building. If there's a specific intersection, specific section of a road where you think there's a problem, send that to them. And the statistics he's talking about are these statistics that they gather through the different use of technology to monitor speed, how many people are on a road, how fast are they going, what's the average speed. Those are the kinds of things he was referencing. I think that that you can kind of see the breakdown of information that they've been gathering, and it's private citizens, volunteers, it's members of our police department, as well as Public Works, and Mr. Dents sits on that board as well.
Now, is this a monthly meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll look into that then. But
It's
thank you.
second Monday?
Second Monday is
Second Monday.
Next Monday?
6:30.
Second Monday of every
Oh,
month.
second Monday of every
Yes.
month. Okay, very good. Well, I appreciate patience
Sure.
on that. All right, thank you all.
Okay, thank you. All right, those are the only names on the list. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward then. All right, item 2 is consider adopting resolution supporting American-made national defense. Several years ago, there was the gentleman who's going to come up and speak in a minute came before us to ask us to support a resolution that was going around to all over the country to get money that was allocated through the stimulus program to be spent on American-made products. This is a similar resolution. This is something that's essentially us expressing our concern to the federal government, to our federally elected officials about the use of American money and it being spent on defense items that are made here in the United States and not made outside the United States. So, Mark Mushu, I'll allow you to sort of introduce this, and I thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank Bob, and thank the board for having me. Listen, guys, the resolution before you is pretty simple. The Alliance for American Manufacturing, who I work for, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan group that promotes keeping it made in America. And we did come before the board a couple years ago, and we're very successful in this effort. The effort today is a little different. What we're finding is we're sending our troops into harm's way with counterfeit parts coming in from offshore, foreign things that we no longer make in this country. Our armaments like lithium batteries for helicopters, we don't make them in the United States anymore. Rocket fuels, guidance systems, night vision goggles, all these things are now being imported from countries that we could find ourselves at odds at some point. The part of this resolution really deals with addressing that manufacturing must be made here. And Washington has to take steps to do that. It's a national security issue. It is also an issue for our troops. The other side of this is that manufacturing by far is the largest sector that our returning troops as veterans go into as work. We're looking to tie in some kind of thing as having that a priority to hire our vets into national defense manufacturing, and they should have first option at those jobs if they are qualified and so choose. So the resolution starts here in Pennsylvania for us with this board meeting. It's already been in several states across the country have adopted this resolution. We're going to move this as a grassroots level for the next 6 months. Then we're going to go federally and state and try to get legislation to force our officials to address the fact that we are not making these things in this country to protect our families and our troops. That's the resolution, guys.
Okay. All right, thank you. Questions for Mr. Mushu? Mr. Galloway?
No, I just applaud your efforts. Thank you.
Ms. Raskin?
No questions.
Mr. Rocco?
No, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yep.
Now, did I hear you right, that this is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're the first ones to see
Well,
this?
come home first, do it at home.
All right, that's, I'm
There you
fine
go.
with first in Bucks and first in Pennsylvania. Public comment. Any public comments or questions? See no hands. Okay, and I guess the other question I would have would be in terms of communicating this to federally elected officials, Senators Casey and Toomey, Congressman Fitzpatrick. You want us to send it to them, or is that something you're doing, sort of compiling everything, or how's that work?
I think we'll take care of that
Okay.
for you guys. Once
All right.
you sign it, then we're going to make it, we're going to try to get a few of these done in this part of the state, and then we're going to start taking them into Toomey, Casey, and then from there federally. So you guys really have to do nothing more than pass the resolution. From there, I'll start collecting them across the state, and we'll, as a group through the country, then we'll start making our moves.
All right, great.
But
No,
I
it's-
want to start hearing you guys have always supported this effort to keep things made in America. That's always
No, it's,
start this effort.
I mean, as Mr. Rocco said, it is a no-brainer, and I'm honored, and I think Falls Township should be honored that, we're the ones that are going to start this for our Pennsylvania. So this would be resolution number
21.
21. Is there a motion to approve resolution 1521?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, item number 3 is a conditional use for Buckingham Retail Properties LLC, 550 West Trenton Road. And before we begin, I just want to do, for those that might not be familiar with the procedures, excuse me. A conditional use essentially means that there are certain uses allowed in certain zoning areas. Obviously, in a residential area, you're allowed to build houses of various types. Commercial areas, you're allowed to build, you're just automatically granted permission to build certain kinds of businesses. However, with every zoning, just about every zoning type, you have what are known as conditional uses, which means that they can be allowed if certain conditions are met. They're not outright forbidden, but they're also not automatically granted. And so what we're looking at this evening is a pretty specific issue with this proposal. It is not a conditional use for the entire site. The conditional use, which I'm sure Mr. Hecker will explain in a minute, really focuses on only 2 of the proposed buildings, and it only focuses on a specific issue with each of those 2 proposed buildings. So this is not sort of approving an entire plan. This is simply looking at whether or not to grant conditional use for 2 of the proposed uses of this property. We need a motion to open the conditional use hearings, or motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Clark, I can turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a conditional use hearing. The applicant is Buckingham Retail Partners, LLC, who is the agent for the equitable owner. The property is tax parcel number 13-028-028, Township of Falls, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. This is an application requesting conditional use to permit a drive-in restaurant or restaurant use at the property located at West Trenton Avenue and Pine Grove Road, Falls Township, Pennsylvania. The applicant this evening is represented by Thomas Hecker, Esquire, and Mr. Hecker, if you've been before the board before, you know the procedure will be that you will make introductory statements. You will then have your witnesses come forward and be sworn. You will take them through any presentation regarding the application. You will then make your witnesses and yourself available for questions from the board and from any individual requesting party status. Do you understand these procedures, Mr. Hecker?
Yes, I do, Mr. Clark.
You may
Thank you.
proceed.
Thank you very much. Members of the board, good evening. Tom Hecker on behalf of the applicant. As noted by Mr. Harvey and also by Mr. Clark, this matter right now before the board is a conditional use request. It involves the plan, which we will have described for you in some detail in a couple of minutes, by the consulting engineer, Adam Bonoski, Bowler Engineering, that has 3 users on the plan. 2 are restaurants with drive-through windows. The ordinance doesn't use the term drive-through, it says drive-in or walk-up. But since there is no definition to guide us, and I think in common parlance, people frequently interchange drive-in and drive-through, we have filed this request to make sure that what we're proposing to do with regard to these restaurants is in fact permitted, and that's why we bring the conditional use application. The other building on the site is a proposed Rite Aid pharmacy. It too has a drive-through, as is commonplace in most pharmacies nowadays, but the ordinance doesn't require conditional use as it relates to a pharmacy operation. So the issue is somewhat narrow with regard to whether or 2 restaurant buildings of approximately 2,000 square feet and 6,000 square feet with a drive-through windows for each should be permitted. And as noted, conditional use is a use that the township has recognized as a permitted use in this zoning district, provided that the conditions that are described in the ordinance are met. The ordinance for Falls Township is very limited with regard to the requirements. In fact, I believe there are probably only 2 that are applicable to this, and we will get into those requirements in a little bit. So our focus of our presentation for the conditional use will be on those 2 requirements that really deal with lighting, site lighting, and secondly, the public interest, and we'll explain that as well. So with that brief background, Mr. Clark has already indicated that the applicant is Buckingham Retail Properties, LLC, the agent for the equitable owner of the property. I've provided him with documentation to verify that, and I think for record purposes, Mr. Clark, I will mark the purchase and sale agreement as applicant's Exhibit A1 and the agency letter as applicant's Exhibit A2.
Thank you, Mr. Hager.
I'd like to have Adam Bonoski and Matt Hammond, who is a traffic consultant, come forward and be sworn. Adam, we only one portable microphone, so you're
still gonna have to use it because as loud as you speak, you still have to get on our audio system. Sorry.
So we'll share, and I'll turn it over to you. Okay. For the record, please introduce yourself and explain to the board your professional background and qualifications.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Adam Bonoski. I'm a principal with Bowler Engineering. I've been in the land development business for over 22 years. I'm a principal with Bowler. Our office is located in Chalfont, Pennsylvania. I'm also a licensed landscape architect in the Commonwealth. And I am responsible for the plans that you see before you and the application, including the site plans and the renderings that I'll be presenting this evening.
In connection with the conditional use application that's before the board this evening, I think it would be helpful for you to explain the boards, and Adam, we probably, for reference purposes, should mark those boards so that the stenographer can reference with the transcript.
The first plan I'm going to be presenting is titled Existing Conditions Aerial Exhibit, and 1 of 1. And I apologize, what I'm going to be presenting is not necessarily visible to the audience. I do have a board that's identical to what I'm presenting facing the audience. Because of the size of the room, we have to do it this way.
Why don't you explain what A3 is?
A3 is a site plan that we've prepared over an aerial, which shows the outbounds of the property. The property is approximately 8.76 acres. It's bounded on the sheet orientation. The top of the sheet is West Trenton Ave. The bottom of the sheet is Pine Grove Road. And in the center is our property. It's a unique triangular shape because it is at the corner of the property, and as the two roads converge, they're not converging at 90 degrees, so we are left with a triangular piece. The site is currently developed as a grocery store with significant parking, and the building shown here in the black area. The current store size is 57,000 square feet. With a significant amount of parking in the front of the building and on the side of the building. We have an existing access drive on West Trenton Ave, parking all along the parking setback along West Trenton Ave and the parking setback upon Pine Grove Road. I'm going to switch now to the proposed conditions.
So what do you say?
So I'm referring to what's labeled as site plan, record plan 2 of 5, and I'll mark it as A4, excuse me. Again, for orientation, same orientation as the last plan presented. West Trenton to the top of the sheet, Pine Grove to the bottom of the sheet. The same 8.76 acres. And as you'll see, walking you through the site plan, we're maintaining the same access off of West Trenton Ave. We're actually reducing the width of that to come into a more channelized access into our loop road. We're also proposing a right-in off of Pine Grove Road that is just west of the intersection, or excuse me, south of the intersection with Pine Grove and West Trenton, and then a full-service access further down along Pine Grove Road. The proposed layout of the site consists of what we're labeling as restaurant number 2, which is 18,500 square feet at the westernmost portion of the site. Generally in the center of the site is a proposed pharmacy. That's 14,500 square feet approximately, and then a proposed restaurant we're labeling as restaurant number 1, and that's approximately 6,000 square feet. As I had mentioned before, the existing condition, the building square footage total is 57,000 square feet. Our proposal calls for 23,412 square feet, which is approximately a 60% reduction in building and square footage.
Mr. I'm sorry to interrupt. You, just to clarify, the restaurant number 2, the first one identified, you said 18,000 square feet?
Sorry, 1,850 square
okay.
feet.
That's what I thought.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem.
In addition, what I'd like to point out around the perimeter of the site, the upper western corner of the site currently is parking. We're eliminating all of that parking and all that impervious area, and we're increasing the buffer on West Trenton Ave. Along the frontage of West Trenton Ave from our existing access point all the way to Pine Grove Road, current conditions, as I showed before, had parking all the way up to the setback line, and we are reducing significantly the amount of parking and opening up the green area there, and essentially increasing the buffer along that portion of the road. The same holds true for along Pine Grove Road. Quickly walking you through the site, access off of West Trenton, you have a road that goes around the back of the proposed pharmacy, which you can access Pine Grove Road at this location, essentially creating a way to get through the site, or also to go through the site to the proposed restaurant in this location off into the center of the site. As part of the conditional use, we were talking about the drive-in restaurants. So the 2 restaurants in question, again, restaurant number 2, restaurant number 1, both restaurants are permitted by right. The only thing that's before you for the conditional use, as Tom had mentioned, is the drive-through portion of the restaurants. Starting with excuse me, restaurant number 2, we've provided the drive-through window on the west side of the drive-through and a drive-through lane that traverses the side of the restaurant with a pickup portion of the store here and a window ordering board located here. We provided approximately 7 cars for stacking within this area, which is designated along the side. However, we have additional room for another 7 to 10 that would run along the building, as you would typically see in a drive-through situation. And those would run along the curb line if there was an overflow. We don't anticipate that, but there is an ability for an overflow. Moving on to restaurant number 1, we've located the pickup portion of the restaurant on the western side of the building, located approximately here, with a dedicated drive-through lane that circumnavigates the side of the building with approximately 10 spaces for stacking from the window all the way back to the lane. Again, we have an overflow that would come back around the parking area with adequate bypass lanes through that area to come around the back of the store.
Adam, you indicated that the total building size is approximately 60% of what's existing, correct?
Correct.
It also would appear that there's been a substantial reduction in impervious coverage as well as the number of parking spaces. Is that also correct?
That is correct. Existing impervious coverage is 233,855 square feet, which is approximately 61% impervious coverage for the site. Our proposal reduces that to 157,626 square feet for approximately 41% impervious coverage. And that equates to about a 32% reduction in impervious coverage.
What about the number of parking spaces?
I don't have the total number of parking spaces.
But there's a substantial reduction.
There is a substantial reduction in parking.
And I believe you've indicated where the impervious has been reduced. There's some now green area and buffer plantings that don't exist for the former Acme. Is that correct?
That's correct. And as part of the redevelopment, we're adding green areas. We're adding green areas to the interior of the site with planted islands, green areas on the front, green areas on the side, and we're adding a significant amount of stormwater management. Currently, the site has a stormwater basin that's located in the back of the site on the southernmost portion of the site. As part of the redevelopment, we are going through the MPDS permitting process as well as your township stormwater code and upgrading the basins and upgrading what we're doing. We're providing a large area of bioinfiltration here, which is essentially a stormwater system to allow stormwater to percolate into the ground, whereas now it goes into a stormwater system and it controls the rate, but it doesn't necessarily control quality and volume. We're also providing amended soils throughout the front of the site and along the back of the site to further address stormwater management, where nothing exists today.
Adam, I mentioned in my earlier comments to the board that the ordinance does not have very many conditions or requirements that relate to the conditional use. However, there is a reference in section 2950, capital B3, regarding all commercial, institutional, and industrial parking, loading, access, or service areas to be adequately illuminated at night. And that lighting is to include sign lighting, but arranged so as to protect the highway and neighboring properties from direct glare or hazardous interference of any kind. Are you familiar with that requirement?
Yes, I am.
And could you explain to the board how, in your professional opinion, this plan meets that requirement?
Certainly. As part of our land development application, we've submitted a comprehensive lighting plan. The lighting plan meets the requirements of the township ordinance and has been designed with state-of-the-art LED fixtures. Currently on the site today, there's old type metal halide fixtures, which you've typically seen in parking lots. What we're doing is upgrading and actually reducing the number of lights, which exist today, to a smaller amount of lights, 20-foot mounting height. And the LED fixtures are a full cutoff fixture, meaning the light source is up in the housing. They're actually endorsed by the Dark Sky Alliance for site lighting. The idea is that there is no upward glare. Older lights that had the kind of the belly up to the light, you could actually see the light source. With the new LED fixtures that we're proposing, that fixture is up inside the housing and therefore reducing the glare. On the plans that we've submitted, we've shown photometrics of the lights and the coverage, and we have almost no spillage beyond our property line. The only place that we do is at our entrance drive, so we can light the entrance drive. And the spillage that goes over that property line is 0.1 foot candles of light, which is full compliance with your ordinance.
Adam, the other statement contained in this section of the zoning ordinance relating to conditional use indicates that the applicant must demonstrate that the application will not be contrary to the public interest. So as this application for conditional use relates to the drive-through windows, could you tell us, please, based on your professional experience and your familiarity with this plan, whether, in your opinion, this requirement is addressed and met by the applicant?
Yes, we believe it is. As I had testified to and pointed out on the plan, we've provided adequate drive-through lanes for this. We've provided adequate stacking. There was questions that came up during the review by your township engineer about where the ordering board, the menu board was. We've placed those on the plan, and we've shown that you can have the drive-through lanes with adequate stacking for the restaurant use with overflow. And the overflow is completely contained on our site. There is no situation where there would be any overflow of the drive-through lane onto a public thoroughfare or off of our property.
Thank you, Adam. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Harvey, you can either allow Mr. Hecker to complete his presentation with his other witnesses and then make everyone available for questions, or do it as you do.
I apologize. I was kind of waiting for you to keep going with Mr. Hammond, is it?
Mr. Hammond.
Okay.
Matt, will you come up, please? Matt, you've already been sworn. Would you take a moment, please, and explain to the board your professional qualifications and experience?
Sure. Good evening again. Matthew Hammond, Hammond. I am Executive Vice President with Traffic Planning and Design. We are a civil engineering firm specializing in traffic and transportation. I've been with the firm for over 20 years and a licensed professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania. And I am responsible for the traffic-related aspects of the development proposed.
In connection with this application, was one of your responsibilities to prepare and submit a traffic impact study relating to this project?
It was. We prepared and completed a traffic study last revised July 13th of this year, submitted it both to the Township and the PennDOT for review based on the fact that Pine Grove Road and West Trenton Avenue are both state-owned and maintained roadways.
And have you received feedback from both the Township and from PennDOT relating to the traffic study?
We have. We did receive a review letter from Remington and Vernick engineers. I won't go through the whole review letter, but I will just mention the statement. The first statement is our opinion. The traffic impact statement was prepared in a professional manner following generally accepted practice for traffic impact analyses. We also received a review letter from PennDOT dated August 13th, and in that letter, PennDOT also mentions that the traffic impact study, based on a review of the submitted materials, the transportation impact study is approved as submitted for the proposed development.
You mentioned that these roads are state roads, and that's obviously why it was submitted to PennDOT, correct?
Correct.
Where do things stand with regard to any permitting that may be required from PennDOT for the driveway access points?
We have actually just started that process now that we received the approval from PennDOT on the traffic impact study. We are in the process right now of preparing the necessary plans and documentation to submit to not only the township but to PennDOT to start that review and permitting process.
Now, Mr. Hammond, you're aware that the application before the board at the moment relates to the conditional use for the drive-through windows for the proposed restaurants. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does the existence of the drive-through windows for both of these restaurants, in your professional opinion, cause any problems or difficulties with regard to the general welfare or public interest of the community?
They do not, with the caveat that the roadway improvements that we have proposed within the approved traffic study are implemented.
Did you make specific recommendations with regard to this plan in your traffic study?
We did. We made a number of specific proposed improvements with respect to the development. Most notably, as I believe Mr. Benoski had mentioned, we are looking at providing a full access driveway on Pine Grove Road to on Exhibit A3. As part of that driveway, we will provide a right turn deceleration lane into the driveway and a separate dedicated left turn into that driveway as well. That driveway is proposed to be signalized. We're also proposing a deceleration lane, right turn lane into the proposed right-in only driveway on Pine Grove Road. Furthermore, we are looking at doing a significant number of pedestrian and traffic signal improvements. Those improvements are basically outlined within the West Trenton Avenue corridor study that was prepared by URS. We are basically preparing similar type pedestrian and signal improvements within this area.
Did your study and your plans then take into account the Trenton Avenue corridor study that you just referenced?
Yes, it was mentioned in the study, it was referenced in the study, and we utilized that study to determine what the appropriate pedestrian and signal improvements would be for not only the intersection of West Trenton and the old Acme driveway, but also the intersection of Pine Grove Road and West Trenton Avenue.
You provided this information related to the study to Bowler Engineering and corroborated with the preparation of the plans, in particular A4, which is a site plan pending before the township. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
Based upon your familiarity with the plan, the recommendations of the traffic study, if this project is approved and built in accordance with A4, do you have a professional opinion as to whether this project would be contrary to the public interest as it relates to those drive-through windows?
I do, and again, it's my opinion that it would not be contrary to the public interest.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have of Mr. Hammond.
So your final witness, Mr. Hecker?
They're the only two witnesses in connection with the conditional use application.
Okay. Comments or questions from board members for Mr. Hecker or his witnesses, Mr. Benoski or Mr. Hammond? Mr. Galloway?
Not at this time, thank you.
Mr. Boraski?
No questions.
Mr. Rocco?
We're going to wait. We're going to have public comment.
Sure. Yeah. Comments or questions from our professionals? Mr. Clark or Ms. Gallagher?
Just a couple of clarifications regarding some of the exhibits. Mr. Hecker, do you have smaller sizes of 3 and 4, or is that it?
We can email you PDF copies if you'd like, or I can have hard copies mailed directly to you. I recognize you don't necessarily want to carry those boards with you.
I don't. So if you could send us 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And before we proceed with questioning, so we don't lose sight, have you consistent with our ordinance, mailed notices to all of the affected property owners. And if you have, do you have proof of those notices, and can you provide that to me as A5?
Yes, Mr. Clark. I have a certification of service that I prepared verifying that we have sent notices of tonight's proceeding to 308 of the nearby neighbors and property owners. So I'll provide that as applicant's exhibit A5.
No, then I have no further questions, Mr. Harvey.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clark, we open up for public, or we?
It would be appropriate to ask if anyone is seeking party status this evening. If they are, a brief inquiry should be made of where they live or of who they're representing. If there's any question about whether or not those individuals should have party status, then Mr. Hecker should be given the opportunity to question and/or challenge the party status of anyone seeking that status, and then the board will have to make a ruling on whether or not to grant those individuals or attorneys party status. At that point in time, they would be permitted to question Mr. Hecker's witnesses. Once that questioning is done, then if there is just general public comment, that can be done after the board has asked any questions it may have. So.
Okay, and just for those of us who aren't as good in the legal profession or thorough, what exactly does party status mean? What is it? What advantage or benefit?
Well, the benefit that they would have is that they would have the opportunity to question Mr. Hecker's witnesses, although we sometimes are a little bit more relaxed here regarding allowing people to ask questions. Only if you have party status can you ask questions of Mr. Hecker's witnesses. It also would, depending on what the board rules, if there's any appeal in this matter, it would again allow those individuals who have sought party status to get the proper notifications if this were to go up to Doylestown. Again, not reading into what Mr. Hecker may or may not do, but absent being eligible for party status, he would be able to object to someone questioning his witnesses, not making public comment. Anyone can make a public comment, but he would have the opportunity to object. So that is why we would ask if anyone is seeking party status.
Okay. All right.
And then those with party status can also present testimony of their own if they would so choose.
Okay. All right, so following the direction of council, I'll ask if there's anyone who wishes to claim party status at this time. Just kind of the microphone, identify yourself. And
my name is Stephen Goldstein. I'm an attorney with offices 2410 Bristol Road in Bensalem. And this is Mr.
Anthony D'Amico,
who was previously made comments to you. His address is 555 Stevens Road. And why don't you...
Make sure you have to use the microphone if you're going to travel anywhere, so otherwise we won't get it on the audio system.
my house is right here on the corner of Stevens Road and West Trenton Avenue.
Okay. Thank you.
Because of his proximity to the property, I would submit that he certainly is entitled to party status. I just have a couple of questions.
Just very briefly, Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Hecker, do you offer any objection to this individual receiving party status for the purpose of this hearing?
I do not.
The record show Mr. Hecker said he does not.
Thank you. On the conditional use application, I know that Mr. Hecker sent out a lot of notices. Does the township have proof that of the legal advertising of this hearing?
The township does. We have from the Bucks County Courier Times that this matter was advertised on Friday, August 28th, and again on Friday, September 4th.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have a couple of questions of the witnesses trying to understand. During the conditional use presentation, one of the gentlemen, I didn't mark the name, made testimony concerning the site lighting. And I guess I would ask Mr. Hecker, is that relevant to the conditional use?
The answer,
And I'm going to interrupt Mr. Hecker for a second. With all due respect to Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Hecker, Mr. Goldstein, I think, is asking Mr. Hecker for an interpretation of our ordinance, and so it's clear, I think it's better if this just comes from me. Chapter 209, Section 50, Special Exceptions and Conditional Uses, B3 states that all commercial, institutional, and industrial parking, loading, access, or service areas shall be adequately illuminated at night, and that such lighting, including sign lighting, shall be arranged so as to protect the highway and neighboring properties from direct glare or hazardous interference of any kind.
Right, so is the issue the fact that because this has, we're talking about drive-throughs, there'd be lighting that would not typically be on a restaurant that did not have drive-throughs? Is that why, I'm assuming that's the connection to the issue of it being, you know, why it's part of the conditional use hearing? Because the conditional use is simply dealing with the fact that these restaurants have drive-throughs.
Right, I didn't know that that was part of the, why the testimony, but that's a sufficient answer. The other thing, I noticed everybody passed out the proposed resolutions. I didn't see a proposed resolution for the approval, if the board so chooses, of the conditional use. And as I understood the testimony, the site would only be okay, acceptable, if the road improvements are accepted as shown and as presented. Will that be a condition of the conditional use?
Well, that's up to the board's decision, I guess, but obviously it's...
Although I think we may be mixing apples and oranges a little bit right now. The item number item number 4 is the preliminary land development. While forgive me, I don't remember his name, but the gentleman who spoke about the traffic, while he spoke about it, the requirement that they get all of their PennDOT approvals would be part of the land development application. It would not be, it does not necessarily have to be a condition of any potential conditional use approval, because it will have to most certainly be a condition of the land development approval. It's already in the resolution, it's already in Mr. Sullivan's review letter, and it would have to be a condition of any land development approval. The board, if it wanted, could make that condition, and under our code, I think that would be an appropriate condition, which I cannot imagine the applicant would object to.
I understand what you said, Mr. Clark, but with respect to the, obviously you're knowledgeable about the ordinance, with respect to the conditional use application, can a conditional use be approved without any requirement of compliance with the zoning ordinance regarding road improvements? For example, you just read something concerning the site lighting, in answer to my question, indicating that site lighting is a zoning requirement that has to be complied with for conditional use approval. Is there anything similar to that for road improvements, curb cuts?
Not that I want to argue with anyone who says I'm knowledgeable, but I do think we may be getting a little away from what we should be doing at this moment. I think if Mr. Goldstein has questions of Mr. Hecker's witnesses, he should ask those questions. If he then wants to question me or on the interpretation of the ordinance or make argument regarding the interpretation of the ordinance, I think that may be appropriate for a later moment. But I will say that our Chapter 209, Section 50, conditional use approval does not require any, as a condition, anything to do with road improvements.
Okay, I accept that. We have no further questions on this matter.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to ask for party status?
Good evening. I'm Joel Rosenberg. I'm a resident, but I'm also an attorney, and I'm asking for a party status on behalf of my father, Leon Rosenberg, who lives at 517 Stevens Road, Morrisville, which is right down the street from Mr. D'Amico. He did receive a letter notification, so it would presume that he's within the area that would be in a position to ask for party status. As the boards are well aware, I represent him as a party in the zoning appeal, and I represented him during those hearings as well. He's not able to make it tonight. He's 92 and a half, but he knows I'm here, and he actually called me when he got the letter.
Okay.
Mr. Hecker, do you have any objection to?
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to ask questions of Mr. Baranowski, correct? Okay. So let me ask you a few questions. You started out your testimony with talking about the size of these buildings, the space, the wastewater management, the plannings, all those kinds of things. Those are well within your area of expertise as a landscape architect, correct?
That's correct.
Your area of expertise doesn't include the impact of a proposed development and traffic to a community, correct?
I did not testify with regard to
I'm sorry, Mr. Bonaski, you're going to have to use the microphone.
I did not testify as regard to traffic.
So that's not an area of your expertise.
I apologize, guys. We have to pass that back and forth. I'm sorry about that, but
So you were asked a question about your opinion about how this would affect the community, correct?
My opinion was based on the site plan that I prepared with the layout, as it had to do with the internal circulation regarding the drive-through portion of the restaurants.
So let's sort of separate those things. As it relates to the plantings, that doesn't have anything to do with the drive-through, correct? The plantings.
The plantings do not have anything to do specifically with the drive-through.
That was part of your direct testimony to the board in this hearing as it relates to this conditional use, correct? That's what you testified to here.
I'm not sure I understand what you just said. If you could repeat it clearly, I would answer.
I'll make this clear. Yeah, thanks. All right, so your original testimony, you talked about the plantings along West Trenton Avenue and along Pine Grove Road. You testified about those things, correct?
Yes, I did, as it relates to the overall site plan. My initial testimony was showing the overall planning. We weren't focusing in directly on the actual drive-through. I was giving the board and the residents an overview of the plan where the drive-through restaurants are located.
So the testimony regarding the plantings, the testimony regarding the size of the buildings, the testimony regarding the wastewater, stormwater management, those aren't relevant to the ultimate issue of the conditional use that's being asked for here today.
I think he's already answered that question. I think he stated that it's essentially background information, which I think was clear from his original testimony.
And Mr. Hecker asked you a question about your opinion whether this conditional use would be contrary to the public's interest, correct?
That is correct.
You answered that it would not be.
I answered in my professional opinion, I did not believe it would be. The restaurants are a use permitted by right. The addition of the drive-through, I showed on my plan and what we've planned for, the ability to have the drive-through and have the stacking for the drive-through for a restaurant that's permitted by right.
So your opinion about it's not contrary to public interest is confined to the issue of how many cars will be in line at the drive-throughs?
My opinion is based on the site plan we prepared.
As it relates to the conditional use and this drive-through, you're a landscape architect, correct?
That is correct.
So I'm trying to understand the opinion, in other words, this opinion that you offered about the impact or contrary to public interest. What is the basis for that opinion? What exactly did you rely upon to form that opinion, other than the overall site plan?
My license as a landscape architect gives me the ability to produce site plans, layout site plans. My educational background gives me the ability to prepare the plans. It is based on the layout of the site as it relates to the ordinance. The ordinance specifies how you lay out sites. This ordinance specifies what you need to provide for the sites. My opinion is based on that.
And if you planned everything the way that you did it here, except there wasn't a drive-through or two drive-throughs, your opinion would be the same, correct? Because the only difference would be there would be a drive-through in this plan or a set of plans that didn't include the drive-through. Your opinion wouldn't change either way. The plan would be exactly the same.
The plan would be the same, other than we would not have the drive-through road and the bypass lanes for the drive-through window.
Assuming for a minute that your opinion is it's not contrary to public interest with a drive-through, your opinion would be the same if the drive-throughs were eliminated from the plan, correct?
Correct.
So what's the difference between this plan without a drive-through and the plan with the drive-through in your analysis of what's in public interest?
As I testified, what we're providing internally with the drive-through lanes and the stacking and the ability to handle the cars related to the drive-through, there is no impact to the public streets. It is all contained on site. So my opinion is the same. There is no impact with or without them.
So your opinion is only with regard to the public streets. That's what you're talking about, the public's interest. No other evaluation of the impact on the neighborhood or anything else, just the streets surrounding this site.
Objection. The ordinance is very clear as to the requirements. It only relates to the public interest. This would be irrelevant.
Yeah, I disagree with that, because if you look at Section B, subsection 1, it says that the proposed change is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of this chapter. So it's not confined to the things that Mr. Hecker's talking about.
There is no change being proposed.
Okay.
Mr. Harvey,
Go ahead.
again, a little outside of what we normally do here. You either have to sustain or overrule Mr. Hecker's objection. My advice would be to overrule Mr. Hecker's objection and allow the witness to answer the question.
Okay. All right. Mr. Bonoski, answer the question, please. Mr. Rosenberg, could you restate the question again?
I can't. Okay. Because I've already been sidetracked. Let me ask in a different way. You're familiar with the zoning ordinance, correct?
Yes, we are in a highway commercial zoning district.
Are you familiar with the section regarding special exceptions and conditional uses?
Yes, I am.
So I'm going to read that to you. Under section B, or subsection B, 1, the proposed change is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of this chapter. Is that accurate?
I would take your word for it unless I grab my ordinance and look for myself.
You don't know that off the top of your head as you sit here yet?
I have not memorized the ordinance, no. I'm pretty sure that's not a requirement for preparing the
For the
site
record,
plan.
that is exactly what 20950B1 says.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe I can shortcut this. You're not offering an opinion as an expert here today on whether or not the proposed change is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the chapter. Is that fair?
Let me try to state it without giving you a yes or no. We are in a highway commercial zoning district. Highway commercial zoning district allows by right various commercial uses. One of them happens to be a restaurant. To do a restaurant with a drive-through, it's a conditional use. To me, when I look at the ordinance, my professional opinion with over 22 years of land development experience, we are meeting the intent of the ordinance that with regard to what we're doing on the site. We are contained within the site. We're providing buffering on the site. We're providing additional buffering around the site than what exists today. And in my professional opinion, what we're providing on the site with regard to the drive-through restaurant meets the intent of the ordinance.
So, and let me make it clear, and if I'm not stating this correctly, correct me. Section B, upon review of any application for a special exception or conditional use, the zoning hearing board or board of supervisors, whichever is applicable, shall consider and determine, among other things, number one, that the proposed change is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of this chapter. Number two, that the proposed special exception will not substantially injure or detract from the use of the neighboring property or from the character of the neighborhood. You didn't testify about any issues with regard to Section 2, correct?
I believe that's a special exception, but what I did say is that a restaurant is permitted by right. Adding the additional drive-through to what's permitted by right, in my opinion, does not detract from the character of the neighborhood and the character of the zoning, which is a highway commercial zoning, which allows the use.
What kind of restaurants are going to be on this property?
There is no tenant that has been selected for the property.
So is it fair to say that the type of restaurant or the name of the restaurant or the company that moves into these restaurants will have a substantial impact on the use of the property?
Based on my understanding of land use and ordinances, the township can't restrict what use goes into those. They permit uses such as restaurants or retail, but you cannot zone around a specific use. That would be discrimination against the user.
But as you sit here today and you give an opinion regarding whether or not this will impact the community, you don't know what kind of restaurant's going to go in there, so you don't know how busy they're going to be. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement for any land development that comes in with a commercial use, that depending on how well they do, how well they advertise, it could vary how much patronage they get. I think everybody would hope that they would be successful and have a patronage that would be a long, successful future for the site.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes party status? Seeing no hands. We'll go back to board for board comments and questions. Mr. Rocco, any from you?
Yeah, I was curious about the sidewalks. So are you installing new sidewalks all the way around the property?
It's more like land development rather than
Oh, okay.
the conditional use. Yeah, it's more of a, for the second, assuming we take a look at number 4 here, preliminary land development, that's kind of what we're coming up with now. This is still the conditional use, so we're still focusing on the issue specifically of the drive-throughs. So I don't know if any questions regarding that.
No, I don't.
Okay. Anybody?
No question.
No, it's all clear.
Okay. Is there any other public comment, non-party status? Ms. Jones?
Thank you. Just for clarification, if I may, even though I've been in the area for 40 years, where does Pine Grove end at this site?
Well, Route 13 pretty much just turns into Pine Grove Road at some point. Exactly when it stops, I
Doesn't
don't really
Pine
know.
Grove stop and start at the intersection once you cross
beyond
Trenton
that,
Avenue?
I don't know if it's
I always
Pine.
thought it did, but apparently that's
But
not
where
the case.
is the determination where Pine Grove stops and Route 13 starts?
I don't know.
Can we find that out, please?
Yeah.
Because I think that makes a difference in conversation and highway safety. And also, for clarification, we're making left and right-hand turns onto this area, 13 Pine Grove Road?
That would be under the plan that the developers, I guess you could say, hoping to get. That would be there would be a stoplight there.
Do you know how close it is to the Trenton Road intersection? How many
I don't,
feet?
It's the
but
next issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really more an issue for the next item, which
Right.
is the land development
Okay,
issue.
is
That'll come
that
up.
tonight's meeting
Yep,
also?
that'll be-
Okay,
right.
all right. Because
So
I know,
this is really just focusing on the issue of drive-throughs, and should these two restaurants be allowed to have a drive-through?
okay, all right. Just only because that question, because the community development right behind Acme.
Right.
People make left and right turns when they're not supposed to, and signs are knocked down, that whole thing. So that's dangerous, and this is going to. This is the drive-through lane.
No, yeah, that would be, yeah, Mr. Abnowski, if you wouldn't mind just pointing
Please.
out.
I am Madeline.
Referring to A4, so I'll start closest to you. Referring to restaurant number 2, you can see the small text drive-through lane. There's a separate lane that comes around the building. The menu board would be here, and then the pickup would be here. So it's a dedicated lane here, and then you would have a bypass, if you will, for another car to get around if there was people in that lane.
Thank you. Where is the other restaurant here? And the drive-through lane is this way also?
That's correct. Restaurant number 1, there's a dedicated drive-through lane. You can see the arrow and the words drive-through, and that's a striped line which would bring you around. The arrow points to the window, and then the menu board on the side of the building here.
If I may ask clarification, please. What is this? This to me looks like a drag strip. Hot rodding, noise.
That again is...
So this is, everything that you see here is a road. So it is behind the proposed Rite Aid. It is a two-way drive. We have stop control located here. There's a three-way stop control, so people coming in don't stop, but the other approaches do stop. And then coming around the corner, you have access through here. There's a stop sign, do not enter. And then we have a pretty significant bend in the road, which is traffic calming in and of itself, and stop control here before you'd come out to the drive to West Trenton Ave.
Thank you. Still looks like a hot rod area. Recommending humps every 2 feet. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other public comments or questions? Yes, ma'am. If you could just identify yourself when you get to the microphone, please.
I'm Kim Reber. I live...
I'm sorry, you're going to have to get closer. I apologize.
My name is Kim Reber. I live nearby in the area.
Okay.
I was just curious, with the drive-throughs, a lot of pharmacies have drive-throughs. Is that a possibility as well?
Well, it is. Yeah, it's sort of a quirk with the ordinance that they're talking about. The ordinance specifically addresses restaurants, and it says drive-through. Restaurants are allowed, but drive-throughs are conditional use. The ordinance doesn't say anything about pharmacies having drive-throughs or not having drive-throughs, and so it essentially means that they're allowed to have one. So this one will have a drive-through, but they don't need permission for that like they do with the two restaurants. Because just the ordinance we're updating it. The ordinance is a little older, so the ordinance was kind of written before people thought you would want to have a drive-through pharmacy before they even existed. And so they're just basically allowed because there's no specific part of the statute that says they're not allowed. So they're allowed to have that. So what they're here for asking for specifically is just on the two restaurants, because our ordinance specifically says if the restaurant has a drive-through, it needs conditional use approval, which is what we're doing. So yeah, this Rite Aid will have a drive-through, I believe that's the plan, yes.
So theoretically, all 3 buildings
Yes,
could have drive-throughs?
correct. That's what they would like to see.
Okay. And is that, when you did that plan, that Rite Aid has one also?
If you'd like, I can kind of walk you through that.
Sure. That's fine. That's fine.
Do you want me to show you?
Well, could you do it on the other one that faces the audience?
Sure,
We've seen
sure.
it, so
So the pharmacy is located here. The front door is at the corner, and on the side of the building, we provided a canopy and a drive-through, 2-lane drive-through. So you have 2 lanes, one against the building, one just outside, sort of like a bank drive-through would be, and then a bypass. And then this is screened by about a 15-foot wide landscape island here, which separates it from the road that goes around the back of the building. It's referring to A4.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, close the conditional use hearing, or?
Before we do, before we go off the record, 2 things, Mr. Harvey. Mr. Hecker, as you are aware, 20950C indicates that in granting conditional uses, the board may attach such reasonable conditions and safeguards in addition to those expressed in this chapter as it deems necessary to implement the purposes of this chapter. If the board were to impose a condition that you needed to have all of your approvals from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, would that be acceptable to your client?
Yes, it would.
And secondly, Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Rosenberg, we have 2 exhibits which the township will not be taking possession of this evening. Do you have any objection to exhibits A3 and A4 remaining with Mr. Hecker? Or would either of you like for me to take possession of A3 and A4 until we get copies of A3 and A4? A3 and A4 are the 2 larger. One is an existing site plan and one is the proposed site plan.
A3 is before, A4 is after.
And Mr. Hecker is going to get copies of those, and since you have party status, you'll be entitled to get copies of these also. But if you are concerned, I will take possession of both of these this evening until we get the copy, the 8.5 by 11s.
Mr. Clark, we can provide you, these plans can be detached from the board, so you don't have to try to put those boards in your briefcase.
They're just going to Pete's office, so that'd be fine if they're left the way they are. Okay. All right. But do you have, Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Rosenberg, do you have any objection to them taking them with them?
I don't have any objection as long as Mr. Hecker holds it personally.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Harvey.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion then to close the conditional use hearing?
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, but you had your chance to speak, Mr. Rosenberg. What was your questions?
Was that the purpose of that was to do cross-examination?
No. No, you'd had your cross-examination.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So I don't want any more cross-examination.
Okay.
I just want to make some comments about the result of that cross-examination. In other words, my understanding was that's what that purpose was. That purpose was to cross-examine, not for doing legal argument.
Mr. Harvey, I did indicate to Mr. Goldstein that if he wanted to make legal argument that he would be entitled. I don't know if Mr. Goldstein is asking for any legal argument. I would think that a very brief opportunity could also be afforded to Mr. Rosenberg to make argument either for or against this application. I think that would be an appropriate thing to do.
Okay.
But again, you can limit it in time. So.
All right, Mr. Rosenberg, if you want to make a brief statement, that's fine.
Thank you, and I'll keep it brief. If you look at Section D, it says in all applications for special exceptions or conditional uses, the applicant shall have the burden of proving that his application falls within the provisions of this chapter and that the granting of his application will not be contrary to the public interest. When you look at the 3 conditions, one of those conditions is the proposed change is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the chapter. And if you look at the beginning of 209, and bear with me a second as I go to that, it talks about the character and nature of the community, the impact on all aspects of the environment of the community, the neighborhoods, talks about transportation, anything you can imagine. And it's the burden of the applicant to come forth tonight and talk about how you meet that. And what they did essentially is just summarize some plans. And I'm not suggesting that they couldn't meet that burden or they wouldn't be able to if they went through with it. But I don't think they did that tonight. I think they simply threw up some plans. They talked about wastewater. They talked about impervious grounds. They talked about buffers. They talked about lightings, which is one of the three parts of the section, lighting one of the three parts of the section. But as it relates to, at the beginning of the chapter, and it would take me a minute to find it, unfortunately, I'm a little unprepared for tonight, my iPhone, there's a whole paragraph about the spirit and intent of the chapter and deals with the quality of life in the community. And there really isn't any discussion about that whatsoever. It's basically what in the world of law that I practice, a net opinion. It's a conclusion without any underlying support. There was some testimony about traffic studies, but there wasn't really any detailed discussion of what those traffic studies were. There wasn't any cross-examination about traffic studies. There wasn't any discussion about what traffic is on the roadway now, what traffic would be on the roadway if there were restaurants without drive-throughs, what kind of traffic would be on the roadways with traffic with drive-throughs. So I'm not suggesting that that's not a burden they can't meet. I just don't think for purposes of this hearing that they gave this board enough information to make a decision according to the requirements of the Falls Township Code. I hate to sort of repeat things I said the last time we were here on the zoning issues, but you know, there are rules, and you have to follow the rules, and you have to meet those burdens, and the burden is on them to prove that this conditional use will meet the spirit and intent of the chapter. And they spoke about none of the issues as outlined in the beginning of the section 209. That goes, there's a whole paragraph there about the spirit and intent of the chapter and how it affects, generally the idea is how it affects the community. And there was very little, if any testimony. I don't believe they met their burden of proving that they should get a conditional use.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Goldstein, did you wish to make a final argument or no? No. Okay, thank you. All right, any final comments or questions from board members? We've had, obviously, a presentation or testimony here.
I think Mr. Hecker may.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, that's fine.
Just in response to that, Mr. Harvey, had I asked Mr. Benoski whether in his professional opinion the language about being consistent with spirit, purpose, and intent of this chapter, that would have been met with objection and cross-examination as to his qualifications to give that. On the contrary, where we have an application that has been described in its entirety that meets all the requirements of the ordinance, then I believe that the board has the ability to say it does meet the requirements of that section dealing with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the chapter when you read that all together. So I don't think you can just pick out a particular item, looking at it as a whole. And we think the burden has been met, and if there's an objection to this application, nobody has produced any testimony or evidence to the contrary. So I think the burden has been met. And I'd ask you to approve the conditional use application.
Okay. Any comments or questions, final thoughts on board members?
No.
No?
No.
No, okay. All right, so we have the issue before us here. I appreciate everybody's thoughts and opinions. This again, and I know understand it's confusing because the next item is looking at sort of the bigger issue, but we are really only looking at the very specific issues here now in terms of, you know, these two restaurants which are allowed in the highway commercial zoning, which this has been zoned highway commercial for decades. You know, so the zoning isn't changing. Is it, you know, is there enough, did the applicant, I guess, prove their point that they could meet the conditions, that they could put in drive-throughs at these two restaurants and do so in a way which does, you know, kind of maintain the character and goes within the spirit of the zoning and the overall laws. I understand Mr. Rosenberg's point, of course. I do think, however, disagreeing with him, that I think my opinion itself is that was met. The discussion of stormwater, impervious surface, both of those things being handled in a much, much better way than they are currently, landscaping being vastly improved, and also the lighting being improved, I think does serve in this capacity in terms of allowing this to move forward with the two drive-throughs in a way that will not, or it fits in with the spirit of what we see in the neighborhood around it. That's my opinion. But we're looking now at conditional use of whether or not to grant conditional use for Buckingham Retail Properties, LLC, for 550 West Trenton Road, tax map parcel 13-028-028. Is there a motion to approve conditional use or a motion to deny conditional use?
I move to approve conditional use.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right. Okay, item 4. Item 4 is a preliminary land development for 550 West Trenton Road. This is going to seem very repetitive, I know. Now, this is the bigger plan. This is, bringing up issues, which I know the township intends to do, for things like traffic, overall traffic, the intersection of Pine Grove and West Trenton. This is bringing in the bigger issues, some of which we've already addressed. And so I'll allow Mr. Hecker to make his presentation.
Thank you again, Mr. Harvey. In connection with this land development application, would it be appropriate, Mr. Clark, that we can incorporate the presentation from the conditional use, the overall plan presentation, and then highlight some specific items that we started to get into in forms of question, rather than repeat another overall presentation?
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Hecker.
Thank you. With that, I'd like Mr. Benoski to just come up for a couple seconds and Mr. Benoski, during the conditional use testimony, there were a couple of items, questions that started to come up that were really earmarked, I guess, for land development. One of the questions related to sidewalks. Are sidewalks proposed in connection with this development?
Yes, they are.
Could you explain where the sidewalks are proposed?
We're proposing sidewalks throughout the proposed development, coming in off of West Trenton Avenue on both sides of the road, providing crosswalks to get to all of the uses, to get to the pharmacy here, and access, pedestrian access here to the proposed restaurant number 1, and then through the site from the frontage of Pine Grove up to proposed restaurant number 2. As far as the frontage sidewalk, we have sidewalk all along West Trenton Avenue, all along the frontage into the intersection, and then proposing the extension of the sidewalk along Pine Grove, all the way to our frontage, essentially to the existing basin. As part of the application, we are requesting a waiver for a section of this sidewalk. It's a partial waiver because we are providing, the ordinance requires that we have sidewalk along both frontages, which we've provided with the exception of the extension, which travels to the south. The reason for that, and I guess I'd like to point out, we have about 1,800 lineal feet of sidewalk along the frontage. So we're only asking for a small section in a waiver to not extend it past here. There's a number of reasons. One is this becomes a limited access highway beyond our frontage here. We have access here. We're working with PennDOT on that. Providing sidewalk on a limited access highway isn't necessarily a pedestrian-friendly roadway. The connection to the residential development up the road happens through sidewalks that actually come out to West Trenton Ave. So it's you can see the sidewalks through the development here that connect over to here. So precluding pedestrians from coming down Pine Grove Road. The other reason is because there's an existing stormwater basin here. There's existing wetlands along the edge of the road, and there's an existing stormwater drainage swale from the residential development that would preclude us from putting sidewalk on the edge of the road. We'd have to redo the stormwater swale for that development. So it's just a small section. We are bringing it here, and we are providing the opportunity to connect across the street to the residential development as we go through the PennDOT permitting, looking at potentially a crosswalk at that location.
Crosswalk where?
Potentially at this intersection. That'll be up to PennDOT if we can.
There's nothing there, right?
There is nothing there. There's no access point today.
No. And I would actually question the need to have sidewalks on this side of it, really.
We would question that, this
That
section
side,
completely, that's up to the board. Like I said, we've got 1,800 lineal feet of sidewalk.
But you're only going towards 13 there, like you said. It's not, you don't want to encourage people to.
We would prefer not to encourage people to, we can't provide it all the way to the residential property. We don't control that, so you're providing a sidewalk to nowhere, essentially. Which you get them further away from the site. Now they have nothing to do but get onto the roadway. So that is a waiver that we are asking for.
Is there an existing crosswalk on the other side on West Trenton Ave?
Across where
West
we're,
Trenton.
oh, I'm
West
sorry. Yes, there's there's a pedestrian crosswalk located here, and there's also a sidewalk on the other side that comes up Stevens Road on both sides. We would maintain that.
There's a crosswalk on the corner of West Trenton and Pine Grove as well, right?
That's correct. It's kind of a little bit strange how it comes through here to an island, a safety zone, and then it crosses both streets. So we've essentially pedestrian connectivity throughout the site and on both frontages. Again, we're only asking for a small section to be waived.
Right. You see the point there?
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, my concern was connecting, the developments that's there, the Rock Creek housing developments that's there, connecting into this. I mean, it seems, kind of a shame to sort of build, if you're going to build this and have these things there and then not have those, that people can't get there unless they get into a car. But you're talking about the fact that it does link.
It does, and we
Sort of
actually looked at it. The entrance, I'm sorry, it's off our aerial, but it's over here, but that is linked through a sidewalk network that you can come out here. It's actually a shorter distance for most of the residents to come out to West Trenton. Only the residents that are right on Pine Grove, it might be a little bit closer, but again, certainly you don't want to encourage that. You'd rather encourage them through the residential to get to the commercial use.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Adam, one of the questions also was asked was with regard to explaining in a little bit more detail the proposed access to Pine Grove Road. And would you explain, is that full movement, right turn in, right turn out, along those lines, please?
So we have two access points onto Pine Grove Road. The first one, traveling from the intersection of West Trenton south on Pine Grove, the first entrance is a right in only. And then further down the road, we have a full movement access, which would allow for right in, right out, left in, and left out.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in connection with the land development application, we have submitted previously these plans and received reviews. They've been revised, resubmitted, and second set of reviews, and as a result, a proposed resolution was prepared for the board's consideration this evening on this plan, which was submitted as both a preliminary and final plan. The last review letters received dated August the 10, 2015 from T&M. And I'm happy to advise that there are no zoning issues outstanding with the approval by the board of the conditional use. There are absolutely no zoning issues. The resolution incorporates the review comments of the township engineer. There's only a few minor comments that are really drafting items, and those open items are will comply items. The bulk of the resolution sets forth waivers. Adam has already touched on the proposed waiver request or partial waiver request, and I'd like to take a few minutes to go through those waivers because that'll answer some, I think, board questions with regard to the plan.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. The first item that talking about relates to a waiver from section 19136B, where the ordinance states that or a request being made to permit driveways on both West Trenton Avenue and Pine Grove Road in lieu of providing driveway access only on the street of lower classification. I'd like to ask Mr. Hammond to step up to the microphone and address the basis for that request and the reason for the driveways on both West Trenton and Pine Grove.
Good evening. As I'd mentioned in the previous hearing, in the conditional use hearing, we did prepare a traffic impact study for the site, analyzing the traffic in and out associated with the two restaurants and the Rite Aid pharmacy. As it currently exists, there is only one access point to this property on West Trenton Avenue. Obviously, again, we're proposing 2 additional access points on Pine Grove Road. From a traffic engineering perspective, obviously, if you can provide additional access to a site of this nature, where you have multiple uses, it is a benefit not only from the ability to disperse traffic, but also from an emergency standpoint, emergency response standpoint. Many developments that I've worked on, especially commercial, a lot of municipalities actually ask us to provide multiple access points so that there are multiple means of ingress and egress from the development in case of an emergency, but also balancing that with how those driveways would work and how they disperse traffic. By having the access point on Pine Grove Road allows us to get people in and out of the development without having to traverse the intersection of Pine Grove Road and West Trenton Road. One of the movements at an intersection that usually causes the most delay and the most conflict are left turns. So if we were to only have the access point on West Trenton Avenue, anyone coming up Pine Grove Road would have to make a left at the intersection, continue out, and make another left to get into the site, make a right out, and continue on their way. The ability to provide that second main access, helps to disperse traffic. I believe also in the Remington and Vernick letter dated August 13, 2015, in regards to this waiver being requested, the comment made was due to the orientation of the site, the two driveways would provide additional access maneuverability and lessen traffic. The board should consider granting this waiver. I agree, and again, from a traffic standpoint, having that access point or having those additional access points help to disperse traffic, and actually would allow, if we have the ability to get in off of Pine Grove Road, would allow traffic to lessen the amount of traffic on West Trenton Avenue through these residential areas.
Will the board be asking questions on the waivers, or I can go right through them?
I think we can come back later on. So
Okay.
you just want to go through them and we'll come back.
Yes, thank you. Matt, while you're up, the next item in your professional expertise relates to a waiver dealing with a driveway grade of 6% on the access drive from Pine Grove Road, where the ordinance provides for 5%. Would you explain the reason behind that?
Sure. The reason behind that is obviously the relating to the drainage and topography of the site. What I would mention is that we will be going through the PennDOT permitting process, as both Pine Grove Road and West Trenton Avenue are both PennDOT owned and maintained roadways. And per Title 67, Chapter 441, the maximum grade PennDOT allows is 8%, and we are complying with that, that grade. So that will be something that will be subject to review and approval by PennDOT, and as I'd mentioned, we are within PennDOT's limits of grades.
So it meets the PennDOT requirement, and Pine Grove obviously is a state road. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Adam, if I could have you step up, please. The next item deals with Section 19137B, relating to the 15 feet separation distance between parking, between parking and the proposed buildings, and to eliminate curbing adjacent to the building sidewalk areas. Could you explain that one, please, Adam?
Sure. This is one where we would consider a typical commercial waiver. We are proposing parking against the building. Your ordinance requires that non-residential buildings have an open area surrounding the buildings. Based on what we've seen in ordinances before, that's a fire marshal comment because they want to be able to fight a fire. They want access around the building so they're not hindering anything. The fire marshal has reviewed this plan and has not commented negatively on the proposed layout. We are providing in all cases access, clear access, whether it's just a drive aisle for the drive-throughs or whether it's parking. We're providing sidewalk along the building. So there's actually a walkway between the building and the vehicular parking. And that would be for the proposed restaurant number 1 around the sides, sidewalk along these sides. There's a loading area in the back, and then the drive-through lane on the western portion. On the Rite Aid building, we have parking against the sidewalk located here around the front, and then an open loading area in the back, and then the drive-throughs to the to the west. And then on the proposed restaurant number 2, again, the drive-through access along just about the entire perimeter of that, plus the sidewalk located here. So we believe we've met the intent of the ordinance, but for a commercial use such as this, such as these uses, we feel it's a typical request, typical waiver, and we've addressed it with the concerns of the fire marshal.
And does that assist with pedestrian access?
Yes, it does. Pedestrian access as well as handicap access from, the handicap parking spaces are located here, so disabled people can get right onto the sidewalk and into the building without having to cross a driveway.
The next item, section 19137C, there's a conflict between the zoning ordinance and the subdivision and land development ordinance. We're showing 9 feet by 18 feet dimensions for the parking stalls, which is permitted by the zoning ordinance. The subdivision land development ordinance requires 10 by 20, so we're asking for a waiver from the subdivision and land development ordinance to allow the parking spaces that are permitted by the zoning ordinance. Next item, 19137G1, relates to curb raised planting beds at the end of certain parking rows. Adam, would you explain where that condition exists and what this request is all about?
Sure. I think one of the things that's important to note, this is a partial waiver. So I think there's 30 places that this is required. We've provided we've provided 22 areas where we've provided the landscape island and the curbing. Areas where we're requesting the waiver really have to do with pedestrian access and pedestrian circulation and elimination of trip hazards, quite frankly. Starting at the front of the proposed pharmacy, we would be required, located here, to have a curbed landscape island here and here at the ends of the parking row. This is a high traffic area coming into the pharmacy. We're actually working with a lot of the national pharmacies and retailers to pull curbing out because there's so many trip and falls on the curbing where you have access in and out of the stores. Landscaping gets trampled, people trip, people fall. It's actually a hazardous situation. On the western side of the Rite Aid, we have, as I testified to, the pedestrian walkway that comes in. We're providing a striped area as opposed to a curbed area, so you're not crossing a road, going up a curb, going up to the walkway. We're just leaving that flat and striping that straight across. So it's just an elimination of that portion there. And then on the proposed restaurant number 1, we're providing the curbed islands, but we're providing walkways. So it's not landscaping that people are trampling through or tripping over, it's the sidewalk. And again, that's access, handicap access, pedestrian access. I think it's also important to note that we're not eliminating any landscaping or any of the required landscaping. We're providing all of it. We're just locating it in different areas so as not to create, it's really a tripping hazard and also a maintenance hazard. You can understand in high traffic areas, they tend to get trampled.
The next item, I think you've already explained in detail, 19139G is a partial waiver with regard to that small area where we're not proposing sidewalks. So I think the board understands that.
Yep.
Item after that deals with the section 19144D relating to grading within 5 feet of the right-of-way lines of both Pine Grove Road and West Trenton Avenue. You want to explain that?
Sure, and this is kind of a technical waiver, if you will. It has to do with the road widening that we're doing along Pine Grove and the access points that we're creating. As part of the grading and part of the installation of some of the sidewalk, we're grading up to and over the right-of-way line. That'll all be done with a PennDOT permit, but it's required to put the driveways in. But technically, we need a waiver from your ordinance requirement on that.
Next item deals with the spacing of street trees as opposed to the number of street trees, section 19148B. Would you explain what that spacing issue is and why?
Sure, and this is not a waiver. This is in the ordinance. It says the street trees shall be at least 40 feet apart, or the equivalent number shall be planted in an informal arrangement acceptable to the Board of Supervisors. So we are providing the adequate number of street trees. Some of these are existing, we're not touching those, and then along Pine Grove Road, what doesn't exist today, we're adding. We have attempted to cluster these as opposed to just lining them up like soldiers in 40-foot increments. We do that for a number of reasons. One is they tend to die, they'll be replaced, but then they're odd shapes, and it kind of makes that formal look not so formal anymore. So by clustering them and creating that different groupings, we feel is a better solution. And it also allows for some views and limited views into the site. It is a commercial use, so we do want some visibility into the site. Again, we are providing all of the required trees. We're just providing them at different spacing.
The next item deals with the section of the ordinance, and in some instances it's repetitive. Same thing is being required, but it's under a different section of the ordinance. And in this case, section 19162A, dealing with curbing on both sides of the street, unless in the opinion of the Board of Supervisors, with the advice of the Township Engineer, they're unnecessary. Would you explain that issue with regard to curbing?
Certainly. Your ordinance requires that your road frontages, or that your road, that we provide curbing. Both of the roads are PennDOT roads. Curbing exists on West Trenton and will remain. There's two areas on Pine Grove. One is located here at the intersection, and the reason there is no curbing currently is water sheet flows off of the PennDOT right-of-way and into our site, where we collect it in a stormwater system located here. By curbing it, we would interrupt that flow. And we'll be working with PennDOT. Mr. Hammond will be working through the HOP process. If they require curbing and changes to that, we'll certainly do it, but it is under PennDOT's jurisdiction. And then there's some areas to the south of our site. No curbing exists today. Again, drainage flows off of the site and through our basin, so providing the curbing interrupts that flow. It's a waiver that's required, but technically it's in the PennDOT right-of-way, so it's under PennDOT's jurisdiction. If they require the curbing, we'll certainly put it in, but we're asking for the waiver for where we're not providing it, or we don't believe they'll require it.
I skipped ahead on one. Again, it was repetitive of what you had said before, but item 13 in the resolution, 19161A, partial waiver. It's a different section, but it also relates to sidewalks. So correct. No need to explain that further, correct? Section 19162B is another section that talks about curbing. It also references road widening for the roads that a development site has frontage on. And again, it's been pointed out that these are both PennDOT roads, correct? Do you want to explain anything on this waiver request?
No, your ordinance requires various widths for certain roads, and we are providing that in most places. But again, it's going to be under PennDOT's jurisdiction. We will provide whatever is required of us for the traffic impact.
There are two other sections. Item 17, section 19178C2, that deals with a partial waiver for providing the location names and widths of streets, location names of railroads, property lines, et cetera, and the location of water courses, storm drains, and similar features within 200 feet of any part of the land to be subdivided or developed. In lieu of this, as is customary, has an aerial been provided to the township?
Yes, we've provided an aerial exhibit which shows all the existing features within 200 feet of the property.
And I believe, Mr. Harvey, that is all the waivers or partial waiver requests. 20938. Okay, just 1 second, please. 20938. Resolution. Just 1 second, if you will. Mr. Benoski pointed an item out to me back under the zoning ordinance. It is not a variance item, but under Section 2 of the resolution, 20938.1A and 20938.1E deals with buffer areas, plantings a minimum of 6 feet in height along the property's West Trenton Avenue frontage, since it's adjacent to residential zoning district, unless this requirement is waived by the Board of Supervisors. Would you explain how that condition has been addressed?
So this requirement has to do with the buffer along West Trenton Ave, because the zoning line runs along the center line of the road. What we're proposing, we're actually increasing the buffer dimension by eliminating the parking. The current parking setback is along this line here, and as you can see from the existing conditions, that is a roadway now, and there is no planting in that area. There is planting along the strip directly adjacent to West Trenton Ave. Our proposal is to eliminate the majority of that pavement along this buffer, again, the residential zone here, leave all of the existing plant material in. There's some plant material that needs to be taken out that has died over the years, and we're proposing to do that, but we're supplementing that where there's gaps, specifically where there's parking located here, with evergreen hedge in this area, some evergreen trees that we're planting in strategic locations, and then a hedge along the edge of the parking, specifically to stop any glare of headlights coming along the driveway or in this parking area. We feel this is a better solution than what's in your ordinance because it leaves a lot of existing mature trees. There's some significantly large 24-inch caliper trees out there. We want to leave those where they are and supplement it supplement it in this location as well with the new street trees, as opposed to ripping it out and starting from scratch.
Okay, Ms. Banowski, if you don't mind, I appreciate your explanation. But, I wondered if you could do the same thing just for the people that are looking,
Sure.
Especially since I know this is where the people are living, and they want to know about that.
So what I was referring to is the area located here along West Trenton Ave, both sides. Currently, we have a driveway and parking all the way up to the parking setback. Our proposal widens significantly that buffer in all areas in the front here and eliminating all the parking out in the front here and what exists along that, widening the buffer, eliminating all the parking that's here, and then leaving the existing trees and shrubs that are in this location, but adding to them, specifically adding in areas where we feel that there might be glare from headlights coming across here, cars pointing in this direction. We're planting a 4-foot evergreen hedge there and along this parking row here so that there would be no light shining off of the property. We're also leaving, as I mentioned, all the shrubs and the street trees that are there, and then it's hard to see from far away, but adding street trees, adding some strategically placed evergreen trees along the entire corridor, and then that same hedgerow here. We're actually providing somewhat of a mound in this area, which would reduce the glare as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
The other remaining items in the review letters, as well as the resolution, or will comply, are relatively minor items, including under general comments, the comments from the Township Fire Marshal, some of which relate to building construction, construction details, comments from the Township Traffic Engineer, and the Township of Falls Authority are certainly all will comply items.
Okay, thank you. All right, comments or questions from board members? Mr. Galloway?
Mr. Sullivan, any concerns?
I have a couple of questions, if I might. Mr. Hecker, you're not complying with the zoning buffer requirements of 6 feet height plantings? Is that what you're saying? For the
What
last
we're
zoning
not
code?
doing is ripping out the existing buffer and putting in 6 feet tall. We're leaving all the mature trees in.
That are much higher than 6 feet.
Supplementing it. The existing trees are much higher,
But your
yes.
supplements are less than 6 feet in height? I believe I heard he said a 4-foot evergreen hedge.
4 feet, yes.
All right, so that's actually a waiver that you have to agree to.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I would say I don't necessarily have a problem with that unless you want 6 foot instead of 4 foot evergreens.
Okay.
191, 37B, 15 feet from proposed buildings, but also no curb adjacent to the sidewalk. Did you mention that?
Yeah, I thought we did. Adam?
Yeah, there's some places where we don't, where we have flush curb, and then there's some places where we do have.
And you're going to put bumper blocks on those parking spaces where you have flush curb?
Or bollards, yes.
Okay. In that case, that'd be fine. That's all I had, Mr. Galloway.
Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. And that's a good explanation.
Okay. Mr. Boraski?
No question.
No. Mr. Rocco?
Yeah, I think overall the plan looks good. I did have a question about the sidewalks on 13, or Pine Grove Road. Can you push them in towards the site more instead of being right on the road?
I think there's a slope there. Is that the issue? Is there a slope?
Yeah, we do have a drainage swale, so there's only so far we can push them. We do have a buffer, of about 6 feet from the road, the curb line or the road line to the sidewalk. They're not right on the cartway.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay. From the, I guess the very first, I think you came with a sketch plan, Mr. Hecker, with a previous arrangement of buildings for different uses. I'm trying to think of when that was. It was a while ago, a year and a half, maybe something like that.
Oh, it was a while ago, yes.
And I know my concern right from the beginning, and I know it was a concern of many people who live in the area, was traffic. We do have a letter from Remington Vernick, our traffic engineer, which was referenced. Mr. Hammond mentioned that our traffic engineers did take a look at what TPD, your traffic engineer, had done, your client's traffic engineer had done, and said the plan was, done, professionally and appropriately, et cetera. Those aren't the exact words, but that's pretty close. There were a variety of recommendations made, and I just want to be clear. A lot of these are tied into the study that was done by ourselves, Lower Make and Marsville, regarding West Trenton and improving traffic conditions, including things like making sure all the signals correspond, doing emergency preemption on that particular traffic light at that intersection, which I think is the last main traffic intersection where we do not have emergency preemption. And for people that aren't sure, emergency preemption is radio signals that travel between fire trucks, let's say, and ambulances to that light, to a light that they're approaching. So if the light is green, it will shorten its green and go to yellow, then go to red. Or excuse me, if it's the other way around. If it's red, it'll go to it'll switch to green, not immediately, but it'll accelerate itself a little bit to allow that emergency vehicle to pass through more quickly and to get traffic moving so that emergency vehicle can go through. That's something we've done on almost every major intersection in Falls over the past maybe 10 years. And so that's something that is going to be part of what we're asking for. I mean, it's part of, for me, there has to be improvements to the intersection. And since this plan is going in, the project's going in, and traffic is a concern, I just want to make sure that it says in here, the applicant, I get the right wording, if I can find it. Item is acknowledged by the applicant, and it says that periodically. I'm reading that as will comply.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so those improvements, which I think are very important, need to happen, and I wanted to verify that when it says item acknowledged by applicant, that's essentially will complies.
Just one clarification on that. We will comply, subject to PennDOT approval.
Yes.
So
understood.
if it's, we would absolutely provide these improvements that were discussed in the letter as part of our traffic impact study. But ultimately, again, PennDOT has the final say.
Right.
For whatever reason, they don't agree to something or won't allow us to do it. We can't do it. However, I don't think there should be any issues with providing preemption.
Right.
And then, we also talked about working with the township and with PennDOT on ADA pedestrian upgrades, as well as signal equipment modernization at Pine Grove and West Trenton, as well as the Acme driveway as well.
Yeah, and the study we did that is referenced periodically in here, and I know you're familiar with, was a study that was paid for partly or by PennDOT. So I would assume if they paid for the study and and our study came up with recommendations, that they would be okay with those recommendations too. So okay, that's a major concern for me. And so I'm glad to see that was addressed. That was the one thing I was definitely looking for in this. And those are all the questions I had. You addressed all the other ones. It was a very thorough presentation, of course, with the two items back to back. We'll open up for public comment. I imagine there's some people that want to have some input. And again, this is looking at preliminary land development for this specific project. The applicant would have to come back to us for final land development at some point. And obviously the one thing they're waiting on, which you've heard referenced a lot tonight, is PennDOT approval for the ability to make these turnoffs and create a signal on a PennDOT road. And so that's one of the things that they wouldn't come back to us until they'd gotten approval for that. If they don't get approval for that, well, then I'm guessing they've got to go back to the drawing board, and they wouldn't be approved to do anything because they hadn't come back to us for final. So that's kind of where we are right now. Anything, Mr. Hacker, one more thing you want to say, or before I open up for public comment, or?
Yeah, public comment is fine. I just want to point out that we did submit it as a preliminary and a final, and that's how it was reviewed.
Okay.
Obviously, it's the board's discretion to make that determination.
Okay, thank you. All right, yeah, I see it listed as preliminary on our agenda. So, all right, is there is public comment needed? Seeing a couple hands, is there a motion to open public comment?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Mr. Binningham is up first.
Good evening, Brian Binney, Chairman of the Planning Commission. At the Planning Commission, there was a lot of concern about this signalized intersection. We're concerned that they're going to entice people to cross Route 13 at this location. There's a lot of walking traffic around there. There's big apartment complexes over there, and there's a lot of people that do walk. And it's not unrealistic that a lot of people are going to be walking to these facilities. By signalizing that, we're afraid that people are going to walk down the other side of 13 and try and cross 13. They don't want to put improvements on that side of 13, but that's going to happen. People are going to do that. They're going to try and dodge the light. They're going to cross where they really shouldn't cross. People do stupid things. So we're really concerned about that intersection. The rest of the property, we don't really have a problem with what they're proposing to do, but we are concerned about that intersection. And even though they keep saying PennDOT approval, if you gentlemen don't agree to accept the light, they can't do it. So you guys do have the final say. So
okay.
We think that's a very serious issue and a traffic problem that could, left turns in, left turns out there. People fly down that road. So we're very concerned about that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jones?
Thank you for the presentation. Again, confirming the foot traffic across 13. There's apartments back there. There's Morrisville section back there. Always have seen foot traffic, even coming up from Trenton Avenue through the Acme to cross over 13. And also not only apartments on West Trenton Avenue with the homes and the traffic light down by 7-Eleven. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of foot traffic, but also, again, on, I'm saying 13, the development was at Rock Creek, the new development over the years.
Right.
There's got to be a safe way for them to walk. Those folks, those residents are going to be walking. Okay. And then also, if I was listening correctly, I heard 4 feet and 6 feet for the hedge, for the
4 feet. It would be 4 feet.
Okay. To me, 4 feet is not high. I lived across from Wawa, and when they went in, they promised all kinds of stuff for, I can't think of the language right now, but 6 feet, and regular trees don't work. They lose their leaves in the fall and the winter. You'll get noise and traffic. Make a suggestion, please. Earnest suggestion, fast-growing evergreen. They're out there. Because you don't want to wait 15, 10 years for a hedge. 4 feet's not going to do anything. 5 feet, 6 feet hedge, fast-growing evergreen, and how are they going to be spaced? You don't want a lot of space in between. I don't know, clusters, I've seen them. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. You want a buffer? That's the language I was looking for. Buffer, it has to be a buffer. Please. And we have to stand up for this. Please, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, before I leave, one question. We have a Rite Aid. We have no idea the two restaurants at all. What?
No, I mean, essentially, I mean, they're not under no obligation to tell us what they are. You know, they may still be in negotiations with people. They may have already signed something with people, and they're just waiting to get approvals. Yeah, but they're under no obligation to tell us what restaurants are there. Obviously, just looking at the size of them, you can get there are theories up here. We've kind of got our own little theories as to what might be going in there.
Right, and according to the site and some of the phrases I've heard during this presentation, this site looks like has been prepared for lots of traffic. And I think I heard the words heavy traffic. I don't want to misquote or mismemory. I think we're in for a lot of traffic. And hours, Rite Aid, when will Rite Aid close? When will they, is it around the clock, Rite Aid? Is it something new coming in? The restaurants, are they going to be all-night restaurants, all-night drive-thrus? Also something to consider. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
If I may, I'll be brief.
Sure.
There have been a couple comments made about the traffic and the, paraphrase, intensity of the traffic. And one of the things that I did not mention throughout the conditional use hearing or the discussion on the waivers is the fact that from a traffic perspective, the existing site as an Acme, 57,000 square feet, would generate significantly more traffic than the site that we're proposing. So in other words, if Giant Supermarket wanted to come in and occupy the Acme site today, that site would generate about 1,300 more trips in a day than does what we have proposed in terms of the Rite Aid and the two restaurant pads. So from a traffic perspective, I think that we are actually making it better. We're reducing the amount of traffic that this site could potentially generate by virtue of the fact that you have an existing 57,000 square foot grocery store. Obviously, it's not open right now, but if someone were to occupy that, it would generate significantly more traffic than what's being proposed as part of this development. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Other, gotcha.
Stephen Goldstein, attorney for Mr. D'Amico. I have a number of issues to bring to the board's attention and a number of questions. To begin with, it should be noted that my co-counsel, Mr. Zaslow, appeared at the Township on 9/9 requesting to look at the plan and the application, which is of course something that Mr. Hecker's letter said that they're available. He was not allowed to see them, and it was made necessary for him to file a record request form. And I submit that I was able to finally see them today. So I believe that this meeting should be postponed to allow Mr. D'Amico and his attorney and an engineer to review the plans. It's kind of absurd to say that they're there, and when somebody goes to look at them, say they have to file a request. So I want to note that for the record. The second question I'd like to ask is, I'm assuming, Mr. Hecker, I haven't seen your notification, but did your notification state to people that it was preliminary and final?
The notification that I was required to send under the Township ordinance relates specifically to the conditional use application, and therefore it would not indicate preliminary or final plan of land development.
Therefore, I ask two questions. First of all, I'm not totally conversant with the subdivision and land development ordinance with respect to notices, but when I look through it, I did see some mention of written notice to persons affected. I could look that up, and unless you, Mr. Clark, have that a little more available.
I think that's referring more really to zoning or conditional use. It really isn't referring to subdivision and land development ordinance.
So, in other words, there was no public advertising.
The agenda, which was published.
Okay.
Excuse me. The agenda, which was published, which and I did look because we did have a slight adjustment to the agenda, and both agendas that were published that we have list this as preliminary, not preliminary and final.
Okay. Well, I would like for the record to state and read, just summarize some provisions of your own subdivision and land development ordinance. And in the section dealing with land development approvals, it says, following receipt of the Township Planning Commission's recommendation, which you did, get that, even though they recommended denial, the Board of Supervisors shall, and item number C says, conduct a public hearing on the submission. I guess this is a public hearing.
This is, yep, that's where you're at now.
And in your definitions, 191.5, it says a formal meeting, the definition of a public hearing is a formal meeting held pursuant to public notice. That's what it says. And then in the definition also of your subdivision and land development ordinance, public notice is defined as a notice published once each week for 2 successive weeks in a newspaper of general circulation. Now, that's in your ordinance. So what I don't understand is how this meeting is being held to discuss an application pursuant to the subdivision and land development ordinance where we're not complying with the public hearing requirements of your own ordinance.
The agenda, has never, we've always done agendas exactly the same way, even before I got here. In terms of what specific clause you're looking at, whether or not it applies to subdivision land development ordinance or it applies to zoning or applies to something else, I don't know.
It's under land development.
But this was a meeting that was advertised. We have first and third meetings. We announce that in January of every year, first and third Tuesday of every month, excepting in July and August when we do it on one meeting a month, which is a third meeting, a third Tuesday. This agenda was posted when, Mr. Gray? Friday. It was
the
posted.
11th, yes.
And in fact, this agenda was on the agenda for 2 weeks ago. And your partner was here, and so obviously he knew well in advance that this meeting was going to be dealing with this. So I don't, whether or not it was published in a newspaper or not, he certainly found out about it, and he's here,
Well,
and now you're here. So obviously.
So I'm here. I'm not denying the fact that my client had notice. We're here. Can't deny that. What I am submitting is that it's pretty clear, pursuant to your own ordinance, that you have to conduct a public hearing pursuant to public notice and a notice published once each week for 2 successive weeks. I dare say that publishing the agenda is not sufficient. I would ask, probably have the same language in the zoning ordinance, and if somebody has a zoning variance application, that's advertised legally. Right. And in fact, I asked your counsel earlier, and you in fact did publicly advertise twice the conditional use hearing. So I don't understand, and I submit that this hearing is not properly held because pursuant to your own ordinance, you're supposed to have a public hearing. I just make that point for the record.
Right. And I will let you know, just in case the timer did go off, so we have 5-minute limits on public comment. I don't know if you're finished or if you knew. I meant to tell you that ahead of time, and I didn't.
Oh, you should have told me ahead
I
of time.
apologize. That's all right. I'll let you continue if you have one more point to
So
bring.
I've got like 2 minutes left?
That's fine.
It says it's limited right on the agenda.
Yeah, but that's, I meant to say it ahead of time, and I
I'm going to state then
didn't.
for the record, I'm going to state for the record something else that's in your ordinance, and that is a grant of waiver. A waiver, and a number of them were asked for here, are exemption from meeting the requirements of a specific section or provision of this chapter. Saldo, 198.28, interpretation. The standards and requirements outlined herein shall be considered minimum standards and requirements. If any provision of this chapter is shown by the applicant to be unreasonable and causes undue hardship, then you can get a waiver. And my question is, what is the undue hardship that's caused by your ordinance, for example, to say that we want to use 9 by 18 parking spaces around the Rite Aid and the restaurant number 2? What's the hardship? The hardship is that they're doing that so that you get another use on the site. That's clear, and the same thing with the less than 15 feet. I mean, if you go through the list of waivers that they're requesting, and I apologize for talking quickly.
That's right.
But I dare say that they have not produced to you and testified to this board why there is an undue hardship by the application of your ordinance. I didn't hear it. You know, for example, the one that I got a kick out of was, well, it's typical in commercial uses. Well, then change your ordinance, okay? What's the hardship? Just because, well, we always do that. Well, maybe I think he testified he did it in 10 other developments. But that's not here in Falls Township, not with this subdivision and land development ordinance. So I would just submit to you that in making your decision, you should realize that while it's very nice to come in and say, oh, we need a waiver and this is nice and that, on each and every one of those, the applicant is required to show you why the strict, that your ordinance is unreasonable and causes undue hardship. Not hardship that they cause themselves. For example, the thing with the 6% on the grade, well, that's because they're opening curb cuts over there. One curb cut was fine for Acme. Now they want to have all these others. And I'm going to tell you what else is going to happen.
You take the mic, Mr. You take the microphone with you.
Okay. What else is going to happen? And I think the one lady suggested a problem. This and this with a left turn, these are going to be major cut-throughs. It's going to be like a speedway. People are going to come in here. Oh my gosh, I don't want to go up to that intersection, that light. I'm going to go right through here. I go behind the Rite Aid, and I'm home free. And likewise, anybody turning left. I mean, and I must also add that some of those waivers relating to the curb cuts, they say, well, it's up to PennDOT. Well, I think the one gentleman said it rather succinctly. Maybe PennDOT has to approve it, but it's your township, you're the Board of Supervisors, and it's your ordinance that says they have to have a hardship. You can't just, if you just relied on PennDOT all the time, all of us know what that means. So, I mean, there's no hardship being shown. And I think that for that reason, the board should not grant these waivers. If they can't do it in accordance with the ordinance, then they're going to have to change their plan. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
People say, respect your own ordinances. And I don't think you're doing it if you grant those waivers.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? See no hands. Is there a motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Mr. Clark, any comments from you or response?
Just briefly, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Goldstein is correct that on the 9th of last week, which was Wednesday, a request to review documents related to this application was made by Mr. Zaslow, as we do for everyone who desires to review documents or to obtain copies of documents. We asked that they fill out a right-to-know request. That right-to-know request was filled out by Mr. Zaslow, as is the procedure in the township. It was forwarded to our office for review on Monday of this week, fully within the 5 days allotted by the right-to-know law, by the open records law. Mr. Zaslow was contacted by an attorney in my office telling him that he could review the documents prior to this hearing today. We were told that Mr. Zaslow was not in the office on Monday or Tuesday of this week, and then a letter was drafted for Mr. Gray to send to Mr. Zaslow. Mr. Goldstein indicated he did have the opportunity to review those documents. There is no, in my opinion, distinction between Mr. Zaslow and Mr. Goldstein. They're both representing Mr. D'Amico. So Mr. D'Amico had the opportunity for his lawyer to be to review those documents, and at all times the township complied with the right-to-know law. With respect to the other issues raised by Mr. Goldstein, I believe that we have complied with what we are required to do under our ordinance and under the law. I believe the board can move forward with making a decision on preliminary land development this evening. And with regards to the waiver requests, again, I think the applicant has indicated a basis for which they are granting these waivers. As you know, granting of these waivers is within the discretion of the board based on the testimony that they hear, based on the particular facts or the particular each site is different, as you know. Our ordinance requires sidewalks in certain areas. Somebody comes to us down at the industrial park, we don't make them put in sidewalks. So it's within your discretion to grant those waivers if you believe it's appropriate.
All right, thank you. Any final comments or questions from board members?
No.
No? No? Okay. All right, so we're looking then at resolution, which would be 1522, yes. Which would grant waivers, preliminary land development for Buckingham Retail Properties LLC, 550 West Trenton Road, with the waivers listed in addition to a waiver granted for Section 209-38.1A, Section 209-38.1E, which involves the height of plantings on West Trenton, which Mr. Sullivan pointed out earlier. That's not listed as one of the waiver. It is listed as something that we can grant a waiver for, but it's not listed with it in the section where it talks about waivers. Okay. Comments or questions, Mr. Hecker, or are you just waiting for the verdict?
I'm waiting for the verdict
Okay.
and the opportunity.
All
I
right.
don't want to interrupt.
Okay. All right, so it just in talking, and I appreciate Mr. Hammond talking about the traffic issue. When this original plan, which involved, Wawa, and we had a lot of people out and they were upset about it, and the plan essentially went away, and people that didn't want a gas station, there's no gas station. But one of the issues I thought was interesting was the discussion about tractor trailers and concern about tractor trailer traffic. Because not too long after that meeting, I was actually shopping at the Pathmark, which isn't far from here, which is smaller, I believe, than the Acme that's there, the old Acme. And I asked the manager about tractor trailer traffic because I knew that they had to drop off. Obviously, the different goods and products that are going to be selling in the store. And I asked how often tractor trailers come to the Pathmark. And I had no idea, no concept of how many. And for that store, which again I think was smaller than the Acme, he said, at least 14 tractor trailers a week. And that was, at first I asked him, well, you mean, like, I'm not talking small, like box trucks. I'm talking, he's, no, full-size tractor trailers. He said, we get a couple every day, guaranteed. And so I can imagine that, with the Acme being where it was, with only having access off of West Trenton, there had to be, a minimum that number of tractor trailers traveling in every day or every week to that site for how many years. I understand people's concern about a redevelopment near their homes. Absolutely, I appreciate the effort that has been done here, which I think is going to improve the area. All of this, of course, is dependent on PennDOT and whether or not the approvals are granted for what the developer wants to do. The current property has more impervious surface, is a bigger headache for us, for our police. We've had fires started back there. Our fire department has to go there. We have people that are homeless living behind it that are a concern. So in my opinion, any improvement, not any improvement, but this improvement is going to be a benefit to the area. So I want to give my 2 cents, and I asked board members if they wanted to have any comments or questions, but those are mine. With that, looking at Resolution 1522 for preliminary land development, is there a motion?
So moved.
To grant or to?
I'm sorry, to grant.
Seconded.
I said that badly. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Just 2 questions, Mr. Harvey, if I may.
Yes.
One, the item that you referenced a few minutes ago regarding the comment by Mr. Sullivan and
Yes.
the hedge, that's being treated as a waiver?
Correct.
Okay, so that's included as well. Secondly, as I indicated before, and it's within the board's discretion, this was submitted as a preliminary final. I know the resolution was prepared just as a preliminary, and it was reviewed by the township consultants as both a preliminary and final plan. So I would ask that the board, in its discretion, also consider granting final approval, obviously subject to PennDOT's approval, because a lot of what will happen going forward is really going to be in the hands of PennDOT.
Well, we had some discussions earlier with Mr. Sullivan, and he would prefer to see it come back for final land development after PennDOT approvals. Is that consistent, Mr. Sullivan, your thoughts?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I think we granted preliminary here, so.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, again, we tabled item number 5. We'll come back to that at some point in the future. All right, Mr. Gray, time to start earning your salary. Let's take a look at item number 6.
Yes, thank you. This is consider adopting resolution establishing the 2016 minimum municipal obligation MMO for the police pension plan. The MMO is a legal requirement. It's required to be completed by the last business day of September. It is done in coordination by the township's actuary and the township staff, working together to determine the amounts. It is based off the salary projections and various assumptions. This is a budgeting tool for the following year. The police pension plan is a defined benefit plan. There are 45 active officers included in the MMO calculation. The MMO is funded by 3 sources, including the general fund, 5% contribution from the police officer salary, and the state aid. Total dollar amount of the MMO for 2016 for the police pension plan is $2,579,000, $579.76. There's a resolution prepared for the police pension plan, and the board is asked to consider adopting this resolution at
That
this
would be
time.
1523?
1523.
Okay. Comments or questions for Mr. Gray regarding the MMO for police pension?
None.
Yeah, what was last year's?
Last year's was $2,234,730. It's an increase of approximately $245,000.
Okay, thank you.
Comments or questions, anything else? No? Public comment? See no hands. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 15-23?
So move.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Similarly, the next one, consider adopting resolution establishing the 2016 MMO for the non-uniform pension plan. The non-uniform pension plan includes all the administrative workers in the township. There's a total of 31 employees included in this particular plan. This is a defined contribution plan. Total amount of this particular MMO is $116,212. Board is asked to consider this resolution number 1524.
Comments or questions?
None.
No? Okay, is there any public comment? See no hands. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 1524?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
And finally, item 8 is consider adopting resolution establishing 2016 minimum municipal obligation for the Public Works pension plan. Public Works is a defined contribution plan. There are 16 members in that particular plan. This is through PMRS. Total amount of this particular MMO is $65,082. The board's asked to consider this resolution, which would be 1525.
Comments or questions?
None.
Okay, is there a motion then to approve Resolution 1525?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. All right, item number 9 is consider authorizing requests for proposals for auditor appointments for 2015 fiscal audit. Mr. Gray?
Township has prepared a request for proposal, or RFP, for the township to send to various local CPA firms for the audit of the township's financial records for the period ending December 31st, 2015. The township has several firms that they would be sending this to. Township is requesting the quotes to be returned by October 7th, so that an agenda item awarding the audit contract can be brought to the board to consider at their meeting of October 20th. The board is asked to consider authorizing release of the request for proposals.
All right, and this is something we do, we did it same firm for a couple of years in a row, but
Yes,
pretty
3
much-
years.
Yeah, so not supposed to keep necessarily the same auditor every year, just because you want a fresh pair of eyes every once in a while. But we've had good auditors over the years, so just basically going out and seeing if we can find someone to come in and audit the books, and for a reasonable price. Comments or questions?
None.
No? Okay, is there a motion then to approve authorizing the request for proposals for the auditor?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the next item is appointing a CPA firm. Mr. Gray?
Yes, a legal notice has been prepared to publish in the Bucks County Courier-Times notifying the public of the township's intent to appoint a firm of a certified public accountant to audit the township's 2015 financial records. This notice would be published in accordance with Article 9, Section 917B2 of the second-class Township Code. The board is asked to consider authorizing advertisement of the 2015 audit.
All right, so it's really kind of going hand in hand with what we just did. We're looking for an auditor, but also letting the public know officially that we're not having our elected auditors audit the books.
That's correct.
We're hiring an auditing firm from the outside, and that's something very common in a township our size, with a budget our size, that you want to bring in professionals. If we were a small township with 2,000 people somewhere in the central part of the state, and didn't have a very big budget, then having the elected auditors do the job would be fine. So. Any other comments or questions? No. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to authorize advertisement?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Consider authorizing township manager to finalize the award for the road program. Mr. Sullivan, when's bids were supposed to come in? When?
Bids came in and were considered for notice of intent to award at the supervisor meeting on the 18th of August. We issued a notice of intent to award the following day. The 30-day contract review period will expire basically on September 19th, which is next Saturday. So Monday would be the day that we could actually issue our determination.
Right.
So therefore, we asked Mr. Gray to have the authority to finalize the award.
Okay, and there's no reason to think that the contractor who was awarded the bid won't meet the responsible contractors, right?
We have all the information in hand, and he will meet the criteria.
All right, so this is just allowing Mr. Gray to do that if they do meet the criteria, following the direction of Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Jones, of course. Is there a motion to approve authorizing the township manager to finalize the road program?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes for September 1st, 2015. Any comments, questions, corrections?
None.
Okay, if not, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented for September 1st, 2015?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Excellent minutes as always. Mrs. Pullen, keep the string alive. Engineering report. Mr. Sullivan, you're back up here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one item to update people on is the fact that the landscaper for the 2013 road program was on site the last 2 days evaluating all the poor grass growth. We expect a plan for how they intend to resolve that issue before the end of this week. Hopefully they'll be out there sometime next week to take care of those problems.
Actually, my phone's ringing. Mr. Dents is calling in. I think he wants to try. He just his antenna must have went up. He knew that we were talking about engineers' reports, and he's going to be asking you about
I'm sure.
road programs. All right. Any comments or questions for Mr. Sullivan?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Is there a motion then to approve the engineering report for September, dated September 11th, 2015?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, bills this month in the amount of $1,521,444.57. Of that, $1.5 million, approximately $1.1 million is health insurance and payroll, and then about 26, about 40, almost between $40,000 and $50,000 is coming from state funds. And then an escrow fund of about $33,000, which is what developers put up, and then we pay out of that. So, again, the vast majority of that $1.5 million health insurance, payroll, and also getting money from some state funds that we were awarded earlier this year. Comments or questions regarding bill list?
None.
None.
Okay, any comments or questions to the public? Okay, is there a motion to pay the bills $1,521,447.57?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Pullen, call the roll.
Mr. Galloway?
Yes.
Mr. Brasky?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Rocco?
Yes.
The board does have a need for another executive session, but I think we'll do that at the end of the meeting and then give summary at our next supervisors meeting of what we discussed. We're kind of rolling here, so let's just keep it going. Manager comment.
Yes, just a few items tonight, Mr. Chairman. First item is in regard to the release of bonds for Quaker Construction. The township received requests for the release of 2 bonds for Quaker Construction from Asset Management Consultants. The bond dates are both January 1st, 1987. Last activities on these accounts were in February of 1991. Total amount held in escrow by the township for the first bond is $916.60, and the second bond, $629.23. T&M has reviewed and is in agreement for this release. The board is asked to consider releasing the 2 bonds for Quaker Construction to Asset Management.
Okay, comments or questions?
None.
They're a little old.
Very old.
They just reached out to us out of the blue?
Yes, they did.
Oh, wow. All right.
Okay. All right, is there a motion then to release the 2 bonds for Quaker Construction?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Township received a request from Mr. Tom Hecker dated September 8th regarding an extension on new Seaview Lubricycle located at 150 Solar Drive, requesting an extension on this project until December 31st, 2015. The board is asked to consider this extension at this time.
Okay.
This was one of the ones we just did in August, right?
Yeah, I thought that's yeah, they extended it into September. Now they're looking to go to the end of the year. Comments or questions?
None. No.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the extension to December 31st, 2015 for solar Lubricycle?
Sorry, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Just finally, Fairless Hills Credit Union Mylars are ready for signature, and that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Comments or questions from board, or board comment? Mr. Boraski?
Yeah, just discussing about tonight. I appreciate your comments. It was your opinion of the property at 13 and West Trenton Ave. I kind of feel the same way. I think it would be an improvement to the area, improvement to the neighborhood. A couple things I noticed. I go down there and I get my truck washed, and I come home, and it seems to appear that somebody's using the property as a lay-down yard. I see a tractor and trailer sometimes too. Sometimes the truck's disconnected from the trailer. I've spoke to Mr. Gray on several occasions, and nobody's ever complained about that being a lay-down yard. A couple times I drove by, and there was, I guess they did soil samples at one point, there was barrels laid out. They're now removed, but again, they were there for a while, and no one ever complained about that. So I'm glad to see the barrels are cleaned up. I'm hoping the truck doesn't continue to park there, and the area does get developed. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Galloway?
Well, just to echo that, whenever you take an old abandoned building and you make something productive out of it, it seems to me it's always good for the township. It's good to see that that corner is going to get cleaned up a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rocco?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Just a couple of things for me. Tonight, or actually at sundown, the Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah ended. Yom Kippur is next Wednesday, the two of the holiest days or holiest holidays in the Jewish calendar. So wish a Happy New Year and to our Jewish residents here in Falls Township. Also, just tomorrow, the Falls Township Senior Center is having a ribbon cutting ceremony at 9:30. For their new, what's called a pollinator garden, which was built in conjunction with Penryn School, Pensbury Manor, Waste Management, all coming together. And this was sort of a very neat community project that was done largely through the funding with Waste Management. And it's I took a look at it over the summertime, or I guess early part of the summer, and a really, really neat job. And it's definitely going to add to the whole vibe down there. The senior center's had a real renaissance over the past several years. New leadership, obviously a major addition. The county finally put up nets after about 10 years of agitating to keep the seniors safe from flying golf balls from the county golf course, and now the garden. So I want to congratulate all those partners who helped construct that, and I won't be able to be there, of course, but I wish them a good ribbon cutting ceremony for tomorrow. And then finally, we have two individuals, and I neglected to bring this up at the last meeting, so it's my fault. Two individuals who put in for a spot on the Park and Rec Board. And I know that they put in several months ago. We've talked a little bit about, both of them seem pretty qualified, and it's difficult to sort of choose one. But I think we have to choose one. We do have an opening, and these two gentlemen have been sort of waiting patiently for us to kind of make a decision about who to appoint. I think Bo Ostrowski is the one, and I apologize, left my papers in my briefcase, but Brian Phillips, I think, is the other one. So I think, I'm going to open up for the board. I've had brief discussions with both gentlemen, or conversations, one through email, one on the phone. But, if a board member has, any board member has an opinion either way about who to appoint to that vacant seat, we'll entertain a motion now. If we appoint somebody now, they'll be able to be, a member at the next
How long is the term for,
meeting. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know.
Do we know who put in first?
Mr. Ostrowski put in one day ahead of Mr. Phillips. That was one of the first things I looked at.
Yeah, I know Brian. I don't know Bo, but I would say I'd make a motion to appoint Bo Ostrowski.
Right.
Since he put in first. It seems better to me.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So we'll reach out to them, and obviously I intend on letting Mr. Phillips know, because both are very interested in being part of the board. Those meetings are public. Anybody that wants to come can come, and anybody can volunteer for any of their programs, and they're certainly not going to sort of shut anybody out because you're not a member if you want to have some input. So and it's a very, very good board, and we have a very good park and rec system going on here.
Did the vacancy come from somebody that resigned, or they just
Yes.
wish not to be reappointed?
No, there was an individual who stepped down. I believe she had her job changed or something along those lines where she couldn't commit anymore. So, but all right.
Good.
Okay, and that I believe is all I had. Let's thank all the members for their patience. It was a long meeting. We're not used to this. A little bit long. I wasn't used to acting as a judge up here, which was kind of interesting. I was waiting for sort of a black robe. I had to sort of deny motions or you know. Although it's not a bad. I'm wondering it might be a pretty good gig. I don't know. Maybe for the future or something. So with that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.